322. Birth of a Star. 322. Ascension. Year 288. Lozan stood at the place where they made a tomb for Jura and looked up at the statue they made for him. He wasn't the only one. Many others died there. Tigashfall was now home to a thriving industrial facility where magical weapons were made by large groups of skilled craftsmen. Back then, the motivation was the harvest of the residual crystals and magical energies left by the Demon King, but that momentum had sustained itself, and these days Tigashfall remained a large industrial center of the central continent, together with tourism for those who made the historical tours to visit the various monuments to the Order's rise. These days, they were referred to as the pioneers, the new revolutionaries who helped the Order usher in the great moment of the early Pax Ionica of the central continent. Founding fathers, as the heroes often said. Some historical revisionists referred to Jura as the first legate of the Ionic Empire, and the term, legates, is later used to refer to patriarchs and matriarchs after Jura. Religious leaders. Even if they were not highly leveled, they were titans of the past. Historical figures to be revered. Internally, within the Order, there are those who referred to the current era as the start of the second phase, the era of expeditionary Ionica. The expansion. The public didn't know. Many didn't, even if there were many within the Order who lived and fought with the first generations of the Valtrian Order. Hero. The word was stuck in her head. She had wanted it, and she remembered her youth. She was so young and naive then, and she still believed. Somehow, she knew deep in her heart that this was a path she had to take. Eons' growing pantheon would be home to masters from many disciplines. The knights, the rangers, the snipers. But Eon never had his own hero. Someone who could wield star mana without the meddling influence of the old gods on their mind. Eon said I shouldn't be beholden to the past. Lozan whispered. I think he's right. I definitely shouldn't. Now that both Hoya and Aben got their domain, some of her concerns faded. She would not be the last of Eon's domain holders. If anything, Eon's expansion into the multiverse would only require more domain holders. More of them, to keep things in a functional manner. There was a role for her to play. But you know, Uncle Jura, the heart wants what it wants. Eon didn't need a huntress. Eon had plenty of that already. Rune, Johann, Kaffa, Izar. They were all his muscles. But star mana was a field he lacked and had actors with potentially risky loyalties. When the other heroes failed, she would be the one there standing by his side, and she would be his hero. I will be an unchosen champion. Lozan whispered mainly to herself. There were heroes, but Eon needed an untainted hero by their side. Someone with star mana. Someone to touch the hero's weapons without the baggage of being a transplant from another world. Someone to bring the touch of the stars, if there were things beyond that void barrier. I'm not sure if it is the right choice, but it is the one that speaks to me. It would be the path you wouldn't think was possible. An act of defiance. Maybe, even after all this time, a part of herself wanted to prove that Uncle Jura was wrong for saying it is impossible. It was a marvel how few words became a formative drive in her life, either as a result of, or as a reaction. Star mana. She had used weapons that contained star mana in the past. Hero items, they were called. And they were these caustic, extremely dense bits of power that would be dangerous to anyone that was too low-leveled. Some better-made hero items had layers to protect their users from the side effects from star mana overuse. For high-leveled individuals like herself, she needed less protection from its effects. Her soul was stronger and could withstand the incredible power of star mana. What was it like to be a hero? And what was it like to wield a power so chaotic and dangerous? A hero could move mountains. Lozan remembered when Colette and Prabhu moved entire dwarven cities out of harm's way. The power of a hero was intense, as she felt her soul transform and bits of her own mana began to convert to star mana at her will. Interestingly, she could mix both and have pools of star mana and also regular mana. The flow of power through her flesh was also immediate, as she felt as if the star mana instantly gave her entire body a layer of strength that she could only describe as divine. Not just that, there was a subtle change throughout her body as it adapted to work with star mana. Now, it made sense why the heroes could take so much damage and still recover. Some attacks from demon kings that would have annihilated lesser creatures only resulted in the heroes getting a bleeding wound. Domain holders usually started with a lesser version of this exceptional durability at first, though the other level 200 domain holders like Edna and Lumuf gained powers that surpassed even the heroes later on, but what the heroes had at the relatively lower levels was truly unfair. And yet, she also sensed the caustic, unnatural nature of star mana. It was inherently toxic. Her soul felt like it was coated with a thick layer of constantly healing material, just in order to sustainably use star mana. This was a power that was eager to combust and was inherently unstable. There was a bit of her soul that flowed through the star mana, as if intentionally controlling them not to decay, and just being in the star mana state was tiring. To borrow an earthly term from Eon, this was an unstable chemical fuel, and it was only through sheer spiritual power that it was kept under control. It was like an additional mental load, even if it was not much at first. But at some point, it would be exhausting. She understood now why the domain allowed her to convert star mana to normal mana and vice versa. Being in the star mana state perpetually would eventually exhaust her. It was strange that the heroes did not feel it, or perhaps they did, but its effects were numbed by the powers of the hero class. Maybe, this was also why the system allowed conversion of hero classes to lesser classes, in order for the heroes to have a way out of the perpetual drain of star mana. She had heard from Eon that there were materials that are apparently known as radioactive. In her mind, it was just like a form of poison, and as she manipulated star mana in her body and her arms, she realized that this was a form of poison. The difference between poison and medicine is a fine line, Lozan. Lumuf smiled as he dropped in on her. This is weaponized poison. Just like void mana. Stella had to deal with the side effects of void mana for years before she got used to it. In time, you too will get used to the weight of dealing with star mana. The heroes gain more and more star mana as they gain levels. I believe that too is a form of acclimatization to the nature of star mana. Lozan nodded and realized how this seemed to be a feature of the higher powers. More star mana was a toxic, dangerous, easily combustible brew. Very much like the dangerous faith and zealotry that Hoya manipulated. Faith was likely to be incredibly dangerous to use as a weapon. I have doubts about how reliable this star mana is over the long term. Its nature seems to be too raw. Perhaps, but right now, I believe you are now the best person to experiment on their nature. If there is a way to purify or improve on star mana, you should be able to find it. Eon's ability to manipulate star mana is fairly limited, and the heroes are so familiar with it that they do not have a frame of reference for what else is out there. Lozan nodded and suspected that the heroes' minds were clouded by more than just the hero class. Long-term exposure to the star mana could influence their flesh and bodies in some other ways too. Indeed, being able to convert star mana and regular mana freely through her own soul was a power that enabled experimentation. There are higher forms of star mana, aren't there? Lozan asked. She recalled Lumuf describing the sensation once, when Cometworld collapsed. A higher, different form. She later asked Eon to share the memory of that moment. If this is true, I need to visit more collapsing worlds. I bet there are some out there. Or a visit to Cometworld. Lumuf smiled. There may be some residual energies someone like you can still sense. Cometworld floated through the void sea, and its speed did not decline even after destruction. A sunless world, it floated through space in darkness. The skies here were non-existent, though the void mages often came here to see beyond Cometworld's tiny bubble of reality and out into the wider world. The bubble was larger now. Eon's presence on Cometworld also expanded that reality bubble. Lozan landed to find almost nothing. Almost. I don't remember coming here. Lozan laughed. Lumuf nodded. It's not a place that people come to. There is nothing to fight here, only what remains of a world that went through death and destruction. The last vestiges of the Canary's homeworld. The Canary, the half-dog people. Lozan met them. They were nice, but perhaps because of who she was. The Canary had a strange fascination with community and authority. Their pack-like nature was still something of a stickler that prevented full assimilation into the Order's military structure. She wasn't here for that. Instead, she walked and expanded her senses. Maybe, there was some lingering remnant of that different form of star mana. There wasn't any. But then, she recalled from Magisar that magic sometimes seeped into the rocks, and so, she walked around Cometworld and began to search the stones for evidence of that old star mana. Here, she had some success. After searching for about 2 weeks, she eventually found a few stones that still contained a lingering, faint amount of that old star mana. It's been too long, and I believe it's mostly dissipated. Lozan frowned as she picked up the few samples that contained the denser, different form of star mana. Its thicker, unusual nature was inherently fragile, and then, it vanished when prodded. At least, she knew it existed, even if she couldn't extract it from the stone. If that doesn't go well, perhaps visit the three-ringed world. The glow from the sun of the three-ringed world has potential for more studies. Are you sending me on a wild goose chase? Does it look that way? Lumuf stroked his chin and smiled. I believe the exploration of star mana's nature is something long overdue. A part of me believes that all these different types of mana in the end converge into something. Ha! The new domain holder realized she had been played. I'm not testing out your wild mana theories for you. Oh, it's just Alka's theory. I happened to buy into it and added my own philosophical variation. So it's speculation. The elf, however, did follow Lumuf through the portals into the three-ringed world. The blue sun. The night mode of the three-ringed world. It stood as if a burning flame raged through the three-ringed worlds. Nightfall brought empowered monsters, enhanced by the strange energies of the purple moon. This isn't the same energy as the one I've seen on the Comet world. Lozan said. Oh, it is not star mana, then. No. The moon's emitting something else. At least, I don't think so. It doesn't feel like star mana. Perhaps, a variant of core mana. Lumuf said. There were a few types of mana known to the order. There was regular mana, which could be colored, in terms of elemental nature. Then, there was star mana, which was what the hero used. Then, there was void mana, the fuel of void sea travel. Core mana was the power of the realm's cores and will of the worlds. Then, there was demonic mana, a perversion or inverse of regular mana. If regular mana was plain water, which could then be colored by the different elements, star mana was a water made of liquefied, potentially toxic and highly dense star stuff. Void mana would be the inverse of that, a water made of black, dark matter. Core mana was then as if it was liquefied mud and stone. Demonic mana was then dirty water. Of course, these theories were still debatable, and Lozan knew that within the magical community that heavily studied these things, the lines that divided the types of mana became really quite vague and uncertain. Was the mana used by undead a special kind of mana? The death-tinged energies of creatures such as the Osroids was technically still far under normal, regular mana. Yet due to the coloration, they did have some unusual qualities. If the death mana was then considered regular mana, there were those who want to classify demonic mana as just a coloration or variation of regular mana. Lozan shook her head. The academic research into the unusual variations of mana was something that would persist. It was often these type of abstract arguments that made her head hurt. Some folks wanted to flat out use Eons, soul realm colorations as a means to classify mana. After all, Eons Soul Forge had blue, green, yellow, red and black, so some mage researchers took the position that this was the system's own internal classification for mana. Eon himself didn't seem that bothered. The system has many ways to do many different things. It is doubtful that one system of naming mana would be sufficient. It was also likely that mana was such a common thing that it wouldn't surprise her that new mana itself could be created by powerful domain holders and worlds. Some mage researchers predicted the existence of world-specific mana types, though they argued the rules of the system often constrained the unique qualities of these world-specific types of mana within still unknown limits. Of course, if this was possible, the corollary also supported the existence of world-specific variants of existing mana types, such as unique colorations of regular mana. For domain holders and senior Valthorns, they were all regularly briefed on leading-edge magical research findings. Though Lozan knew from experience that they were often so dry and boring that not all members of the order remembered them. Perhaps, only mages and those with related classes. The hope, of course, was that for senior members of the order, they were more likely to encounter these edge cases when exploring new worlds, so these findings would equip them with some basis to engage with such unique types of powers. This isn't it, Lozan said. Thanks for your help, Lumuf. I'll need to speak to Stella and see whether she can find me one of these near-death worlds again. No worries. Near-death worlds, Stella repeated. Got it. I'll look out for it. I think if we use Cometworld as a basis, it's likely that these worlds have unstable movements in the void sea. If we find any, we'll let you know. Lozan felt a strange presence from Stella, as if the star mana within her body wanted to pull away from her. Do you feel that too, Stella? Yes. Stella laughed. I feel it all the time, especially around heroes. It's nothing. You get used to the sensation of the energies within you reacting to something. Our mana and soul is densest within our body, but it actually extends slightly outside of our physical body. This is especially true for domain holders who have this protective shell which prevents the outside reality from influencing us. What happens if I touch you? Lozan asked, curious, yet her body and her instincts screamed against it. Oh, for you, nothing. I believe both our barriers will prevent something from happening. For non-domain holders though, not so good. I suggest you don't touch any of my void mages. They might suffer burns. 323. Fermenting nuts. Year 289. The Order gathered the data together and made a projection of the future Demon King's invasions over the next few years. According to Hawa, we would need to wait about 20 to 25 years for the special item to be completed, which we now nicknamed as the Ringbreaker. We expected that by year 290, the Demon Kings would arrive on two worlds, Kaval and Triatuga. On Kaval, we would keep the Demon King pacified until Hawa summoned a hero, if only to allow for experimentations of the nature of the hero's swords and further understanding of the growing hero items. With Lozan's ability to use star mana, we would be able to use our own ways to experiment with the nature of these growing heroic items. The Order also wondered whether Lozan could then replicate them to some degree. On Triatuga, our plan would be simply to just kill it, mainly with our stronger domain holders. Our operations on Triatuga were mainly located in the human side of things. As usual, we would use our level 140s to try to soften the Demon King, before the domain holders stepped in to finish the job. After that, year 293, our estimates based on the strength of paths in the Void Sea was that Kabur and the White Shores would both face a Demon King. On White Shores, we hoped to see our newfound ally, the White Statue, in action. So, for the White Shores, we would not send over the Order hopefuls. Instead, it would just be a delegation of domain holders. It would be a similar sequence of events on Kabur. Since we had made a deal with the Osroids, I'd like to just get in there, finish the job, and get out. Then, for year 295, Terrace the Floating Islands, the Three-Ringed World, and also Delvegard would have their turn with the demonic invasion. For the Floating Islands, we wanted to observe the mechanic of the Demon King's invasion. According to the ancient lore of the Floating Islands, the inherent laws of the Floating Islands caused the Demon King to spawn in a very specific, demonic island, that floated high above all the other islands, and the demons would then invade the other islands from that main island. The Three-Ringed World had higher demonic king invasion frequency than the other peripheral worlds due to the two concurrently active demonic pathways, partly due to the unique nature of the three rings. It wouldn't be much of a problem for us to deal with it. The dwarves of Darkguard and Delvegard had an interest in the defeat of the Demon King, and for them, we wanted them to feel like they had a part in this great war. So, for Delvegard's battle with the Demon King, we would get the dwarves to battle the rest of the demons while the domain holders dealt with the Demon King. On the home front, three worlds would have their Demon King much later in year 298 together with the peripheral world of Sarlpi and the Great Steppes. For these three worlds, it would be the usual plan. An organization of our scale has to constantly execute. There is a continuous, sustained execution of earlier plans. What I feared most, at this point, was whether we had begun to underestimate the Demon Kings. We had seen many Demon Kings and had a good feel for their range of capabilities, but was Multipassor that energy-corrupting Demon King of Gigantodragon on the higher end of their Demon Kings? Were there even stronger Demon Kings? Because, if this was what the Demon Kings were all capable of, how did they defeat the gods? By attrition. Surely, those blessed with the powers of faith, and ability to wield faith as miracles could easily destroy such Demon Kings. If Hoya and Aben could manage it, surely many others could as well. The comets, thus, make sense. The powers of faith couldn't respond quick enough to fend off a comet, unless Hawa himself intervened directly. It costs me faith points to destroy a comet. Too many of these comets, then I would have to delay some of them. Delay. Faith points can do more than just destroy things. Creation of space, reducing speed. I see. I do not understand how demons can ever hope to triumph against a god. It can destroy the weaker gods with smaller core worlds. Without sufficient faith points, the demons can destroy them by sheer attrition, and as their builds scale, they can then use that extra volume to wear down even the stronger gods. Though for now, they appeared fairly stable. The odds of the demons winning were low. So, our focus would be growing our strength. But at the same time, since we were going to allow Kaval to have a summoned hero, I asked for an alternative peripheral world. Let me see. There are two more worlds you may claim. They are a little further from this group of peripheral worlds and will need you to hop through one of my outer ring worlds, but it is also drifting away from me. Would it make a difference in the time you need? It should shave about 3 years off the time if you get to one of these worlds and destroy the Demon King. I see. Send us the coordinates. I will bestow the coordinates on my representative, Olivia. You may get her to give you the details. A visit to see how Olivia of Olpash and the Emperor Aranuil on Shasan would be fun. Hoya's choice was fairly simple. For a Ma Tree Arch who preached the glory of Eon, There really was no other choice worth thinking about. She chose to bind herself to me, and it was once again, for me, a humbling experience. I felt, as if in that instant, a bond formed between mine and hers. Hoya's soul opened, and my own spiritual tendrils spawned within her, as if now I lived within and through her. I could, if I wanted to, read every bit of her memories and thoughts. And you are very sure of this? I asked, unsure if she was ready for this immense commitment. I do not believe that system would offer it to anyone who isn't willing to make that sort of commitment and decision. That was true. I found her choice brought about a strange balance to my spirit, as now I had both a man and a woman as my subdomains, a priest and a priestess. An avatar and a zealot. A connection to both souls, and as a subdomain, it brought with it all the extensions that entailed. Yet, a subdomain also empowered the main domain. Number of clones increased by 1. You may now deploy 1 more additional clone. I suppose for every additional subdomain I could get an extra clone. Maybe more once they got stronger. When Lumuf went up to level 200, he also improved my own combat abilities. Year 290. TreeTree. The demon's invasion had begun, and the Boar folks transformed into their demon-possessed forms. The presence of demon champions opened a spiritual link that poisoned the land, and that poison then spread onto the Boar folks who opened their soul to that sort of demonic influence. The Boar folks split into 2. Those that controlled demons and those that didn't. The demon tamers of the Boar folk, now overwhelmed by the powers of the demons, exhibited unique demonic abilities. They took on demonic forms with outer carapaces made of the same kind of demonic stuff as the regular demonic creatures. This was where we noticed how the demons were more powerful on TreeTree. The demon-controlled demon tamers were now working for the demons, and the demons' champions used the tamers' powers to enhance their own strength. Curious, my order operatives quickly captured and incapacitated few of these demon tamers and placed them under observation within my biolabs. Their spiritual realm was transformed by the presence of the demons. In the regular spiritual spring, the spring with rocks around it released clear water into the world around them and in doing so nourished the body. In Heroes, there were these extra floating vases that poured star mana into their souls. In the demon tamers, these were instead vases of fire, and out of that came the fiery demonic mana. The bodies of the Boarfolk accepted the demonic mana easily. Our biolabs soon realized that the flesh of the Boarfolk were adapted to demonic exposure. We looked into their souls and realized that their mana was now split into 2. The upper layer was the demonic mana. It flowed into almost every part of their body. Then beneath that was a layer of thin, unusual form of mana that separated the regular waters of their spirit from the burning demonic mana above. We quickly tried to extract this unusual form of mana, only to discover it wasn't mana. It was a form of spiritual layer, where mana turned spiritual. A coating. The look into the nature of their soul spring was enlightening. There were demon-geared skills, and these took the form of glowing red rocks. As if molten lava was frozen and encased in glass. They glowed when the fires of the demonic mana touched them. These red rocks emitted abilities that enhanced the demons close to them. I wondered if these spiritual layers could be replicated, and I wondered how I could use them to manipulate the forms of mana within a soul. Not just that, could I use this to safely use void mana and star mana with massively reduced side effects? If so, I could potentially introduce a newer generation of void mages much faster, without the complicated void mana exposure, decurse, and healing under the existing process. Also, I wondered whether these demon tamers operated and were controlled in a manner similar to the demonic parasites from a few decades ago. They were not. They were more like demonic spirits. In fact, this was more like demon possession by a spirit as my old life knew them. A situation where the demonic spirit was more powerful than the host, instead of a mutually symbiotic relationship. A situation where the host or contract maker was a slave of the spirit. Even within the confines of the biolab, the demonic energies were constantly exerting itself throughout the body, while the normal mana of the Boarfolk was suppressed beneath that spiritual layer. I could see why the demons possessed them. The power of the demon tamers made the strength of the demon armies much stronger, similar to how beast tamers, like Johann, could empower their animal companions. These demon-possessed Boarfolk also added a layer of tactics and strategy to the normally reckless demons, though in actual combat, they attacked and fought viciously with no care or self-control. They had fully submitted to the demon's power. Fascinated with the nature of their soul spring, I commanded more order operatives to capture the demon-possessed Boarfolk on a large scale. We captured thousands of demonic tamers and with the help of void mages, chucked them to my clones where I began extensive experimentation on them. Quite a large number of these demonic tamers died as a result. For the rest that survived, I forcefully extracted the demon taming aspect of their class for studies. I wondered, partly out of curiosity, could a domain holder resist the effects of the demon taming? Could a boarfolk demon tamer, who reached its domain, overpower the demon's control? The idea was fascinating, but actually experimenting on the idea was untenable. The idea of a level 140 Valthorn under the demon's influence did not appeal to me. There was no way of ensuring that these demon tamers could respond to our command and remain friendly when exposed to the immense presence of a demon king. Unless I shored up their souls with our own presence. It was an absolutely crazy idea and the benefits were quite low, so after a few days I chucked the idea into the bin. But it was interesting to observe the boar folks with their classes ripped out of them. The demon's ability to control them faded the moment those demon-linked classes were removed, and many looked absolutely puzzled. I was torn on whether I should kill these formerly demon-possessed boarfolk. On one hand, they had intentionally chosen the demon tamer classes and used demons to maintain power and wage wars against the humans and fairies. The boar folks even maintained small demonic hatcheries in order to ensure a steady supply of demons. On the other hand, without the presence of the stronger demon champions that awakened their senseless aggression, they were pretty much like any other society. It was a problem that annoyed me, and so, in the end, I elected to release the class-removed boarfolk into the wild for now. I would observe them for a bit more before deciding whether the boarfolk should be eradicated. They were much weaker without their classes. Some of them expressed shock, most of them didn't believe that they would wake up from the haze. They were hugely adapted to live in the demon-corrupted lands of TreeTree, a place that the humans or the fairies didn't want. I reckon they only survived as the third force on TreeTree due to the terrain and were the weakest of the three. The boarfolk encampments throughout their terrain were small and most of them remained hidden. The demons slaughtered boarfolk if they met, so it was not as if being one with the boarfolk spared the rest of their kind from the problem. If by some miracle that the boarfolk demon tamers survived the destruction of the demon king, then they would be considered as those who survived a terrible storm. But the residue of the demon king's presence on their souls was so strong that many turned insane or became incredibly aggressive, even against their own kind. In other words, if I wanted boar folks to survive and be a part of regular society, they could not take the demon tamer class or any of the other demon-related classes. Else, they would have to be exterminated. But it seemed that the system remembers this racial bias and the boarfolk were offered the chance to be demon tamers quite regularly. I did not want to eradicate their species, even despite their extensive demonic use. So, in the future, I planned to have the order offer the surviving boarfolk, any who wanted it, a chance to have their demon tamer and other similar classes removed. Anyone who didn't would have to die. The demon's power was too dangerous, especially since they lost their own sense of self. While this happened, the demon king finally arrived. The demon king was a fairly powerful giant beast. It resembled some kind of bear and had a range of elemental powers. But its strength was in the middle of the pack. The war against the demon king of TreeTree was swift. Lumuf, Edna, and my domain holders arrived and the battle was over in about a day. They gained a level or two, but nothing particularly special. With the demon king dead, the powers of the demonic champions faded and the boarfolk returned to normal. It was the shortest demonic war in the recorded history of TreeTree. But the scars left by the demonic possession among the remaining boarfolk would take much longer to heal. Kaval. The arrival of the demons on Kaval wasn't a big deal for the natives. Many of the towns and cities already had a strong standing army, and the generally high-leveled knights, equipped with the heroic descendant swords, were able to defeat the weaker demons without much problem. The demons that arrived this time were mainly land-based behemoths that took on a few forms. The larger class of demons were big, golem-like creatures that resembled rough stone structures, the smaller ones were wolf-like rock demons. These demons' heavy natural armor made them resistant to regular weapons, but still vulnerable to the descendant sword's magical powers. It was also Lausanne's first exposure to the hero swords. They call out to me. I can hear them. Lausanne blinked as she approached one of these fortified night cities. Edna nodded. It's interesting, isn't it? Aben told me he heard them once before, but now he can't hear them at all. I can't, either. So Star Mana is behind it all. Lausanne said as she focused. I see. The voice transmission is through some kind of subtle use of Star Mana. Exactly. They need Star Mana. Lausanne frowned as she recited what they said. Oh, the swords, they don't have much Star Mana left. The domain holder hesitated to approach the hero swords. I don't see why you should avoid it. Edna shrugged. Feed them some of your star mana. They could be stronger that way. That helps our cause. The main hero sword vibrated as Lozan approached. Guards tried to stop them, but they couldn't move in Edna's presence. A domain holder's presence was immensely effective in petrifying any guards with the weight of their levels. Lozan reached out and touched the hero's sword, located at the center of the square, with a single finger. There was a brief spark, and then her star mana flowed into the hero's sword. Then, the glow of the weapon intensified, as if it was recharged by a hero. She blinked, when at that moment, a magical summoned copy of the same sword she just touched appeared in her other hand. Edna clapped, while the petrified guards watched helplessly. Oh, you made a copy. Not really. It's my ability to replicate the sword's power. I can't replicate the ability to create descendant swords, but I now have this sword's attacks and skills. I believe this is what a hero would get, if they actually touched the sword. Lozan made practice swings with the magical summoned copy and nodded. She then turned to the hero's sword, which settled back to its position, now fully recharged. Thank you. It glowed briefly in response. Would you like a tour of the cities? Shouldn't be too hard to find all the nearby hero's swords and get them a good touch-up. Edna offered. I think Samuel did something similar when he recharged all the hero defensive items. We were not sure whether the system would trigger a hero summon if an actual hero was present. So for now, we decided to keep Colette and the rest of them off Caval. The demons were easy to deal with. The slightly harder problem was keeping the Demon King occupied without killing it. In the end, after Lozan's tour of the hero's swords, the domain holders decided to beat up the Demon King until it was half dead, and then left Lumuf behind to keep it suppressed. Lumuf would regularly drain magical energy from the heavily wounded Demon King, not enough to cause it to trigger its self-detonation, but enough that it was occupied. I wondered how many heroes would come to Caval. I hoped we could get at least 2. That way we could have some experiments on how strong these growing weapons could get and on what influenced their growth. 324. Caval's Heroes. 324. Year 290 continued. Caval's Demon King. Lozan was first of all the domain holders to get a chance to hit the Demon King. I get the first swing at it. Of course. We are all eager to see where our own star mana domain holder stands next to the Demon King. Hoya smiled. Go for it. In fact, we all knew she was eager to test out her powers. Lozan struck the Demon King with fury not unlike a level 100-ish hero, and her observations were interesting. The star mana within my body subtly pushes back against the void mana of the Demon King. Lozan realized why the heroes had a unique insight into the battles against their Demon Kings. The star mana in their body's net repulsion against parts of the Demon King could be used to identify where the Demon King's core was. That's a rather clever exploit of star mana. Lumuf thought, watching the battle from afar. I thought it subtly resembled how magnets of the same poles pushed against each other. Thus, from the direction of that repelling force, we could triangulate the center of the source of that same other pole. Aben, Hoya, and the others soon joined in the battle. Well, all except Lumuf and Edna, who decided to talk for a little bit longer. The two were more powerful, and it would be a shame to rob much needed experience from the junior domain holders. We speculated that the hero class likely developed an inherent ability to read those signals, perhaps to a much finer level. That force only showed up when there was sufficient star mana to go around, especially if not obfuscated by many other competing signals. A Demon King emitted many types of presences. A spiritual one, which governed some of their abilities. Some demons also had a normal magical core, or in certain types of Demon Kings, multiple magical cores. This, usually, was the same as their spiritual core, as with humans, but it was not unusual for powerful monsters to have multiple such magical cores. These were like mana batteries and crystals split throughout their flesh, and they also emitted a magical presence. Lozan's weapons glimmered with the power of that incredible mana. Her blades were indistinguishable from those of the heroes. She could borrow the powers of the heroes and use them as if they were her own. Yeah, it's only present when almost my entire body is flooded with this star mana. Back then, there were 2 real categories of hero items. Some hero items could use normal mana and expressed a weaker version of its abilities. These were the type of hero items normally left behind as relics for their descendants as defensive artifacts for many ancient cities. Then, there were those that only exclusively used star mana. Stella quipped. I suppose with you around, we can now tell apart what are inherently the hero class abilities and what are the star mana's natural qualities. The void domain holder wasn't much of a combatant, but gaining levels required her to participate. The two elements were generally pretty tightly packed together. I had some limited star mana, thanks to my special star mana collection leaves. What I had was about 1, if not 2 magnitudes less than the heroes, and my own normal mana was significantly, like many times larger than even the hero's pool of star mana. For me, my star mana may as well have been a tiny pond, next to my ocean of regular mana. So, it didn't demonstrate any qualities. It was like adding salt to an ocean. The ocean didn't get any more salty. But now, we could make great strides into demystifying the overpowered abilities of the hero. The Demon King of Caval gave Lozan a good fight and was probably above average in terms of strength. But once Lumuf and Edna stepped in and helped, the Demon King's defenses crumbled. Most Demon Kings we'd encountered had multiple gimmicks. Of these gimmicks, most had a spiritual element. The Demon King's spiritual template, in other words, was inherently vulnerable to powers of the Soul Forge, and it was how Lumuf could functionally disable or lock down certain gimmicks like resurrection or split forms. The Demon King's best chance against someone like Lumuf was a pure strength type of Demon King. A Demon King with so much inherent strength that didn't rely on gimmicks. There were some out there, I believe. Multipus was pretty highly ranked, as was the Demon King of Gigantodragon. I could tell that star mana's damage was really quite powerful. As Lozan added more different hero-type weapons to her arsenal, I could only imagine her being far stronger than heroes at level 200. From Lumuf and Edna's experience, the gain in their combat strength from level 150 to 200 was incredible. Edna used to just deal pathetic damage at level 150, and Lumuf wasn't much better without Avatar. If level 150 was the starting point, then level 200 was when Edna could not only match a full-powered hero but overpower one and win. Still, Lozan's star mana gave her a huge damage edge over her level 150 peers, which meant she was immediately more useful against the Demon Kings, compared to her peers like Aben, Kapha, Rune, and so on. This was clear to us during the Demon Comet incident. The rest of the domain holders had to be supported by an arsenal of high quality, extremely powerful tools just to keep Multipus occupied and slow it down. The heroes had no such limitation. The battle was over. We left the Demon King at less than a fifth of its strength. The domain holders had overpowered the Demon King and left it pretty much disabled. Lumuf ripped off large chunks of the Demon King's spiritual energies, and Lozan, as a result of one of the hero's swords, gained a set of sealing swords type of ability. She used it, together with Lumuf's vines, to keep the Demon King suppressed. Now, we waited for the summon of Caval's hero. One of the great validations of Lozan's much larger pool of star mana was that I could then definitely answer whether the hero's star mana was potentially tainted. I had a small amount of star mana on my own, but I wasn't exactly sure whether my Earthling experience or the fact that I also went through the hero summon process as a byproduct influenced the qualities of the star mana. A part of me suspected it wasn't, but again there was no proof. On this front, it was a relief to say it wasn't. Lozan, as a pure, native domain holder with access to star mana, meant the hero's star mana wasn't tainted with secret bugs. At least, the gods were not so paranoid to do so. Year 291. Caval continued to face lesser demonic attacks, but with its Demon King paralyzed and Lumuf regularly checking in on the Demon King to ensure that the set of magical seals we placed around the Demon King kept it suppressed, there really was no major threat to the quite powerful Knights of Caval. Lozan, I have a request. Kay said to her as part of their meetings. The League of Heroes needs someone who is also at their level to guide them. I know Colette, at the moment, has taken up the role as the lady boss, but I want someone else to balance out her influence. She's also quite occupied with her family to actually spend so much time on things. Colette had decided to have a second child with Prabhu, after her first daughter, Rahana. They wanted a few more, too. I wondered for a moment whether this was how the very first heroes populated the world with humans, because I recalled Hawa once saying that the first heroes had no mental barriers or mental suggestions that prevented them from forging new families. The wait wasn't long. A few months after the Demon King was sealed, it came. I learned of it through Hawa. Ah, the hero will arrive soon. Hawa spoke through his divine relic, perhaps he could tell from the changes to his faith points. It happened just as quickly as I felt the world warp so slightly. As if the bubble of reality was twisted ever so slightly to allow a strand from the unknown to reach into the world of Caval, and through that strand, two heroes emerged. I wonder whether it was because I was more sensitive to heroes now, that I could tell where they were without even having to rely on my network of trees. Caval, after all, was only home to a node tree. And yet I could still have a rough feel for where these heroes were. Those that came through were a couple. A boy and a girl, both teenagers. They looked absolutely lost when we found them in the woods of Kaval. Kaval was a sparse land, filled with large, unclaimed spaces between all the fortress towns. Lands that were sometimes filled with monsters. Trade thus followed old, familiar routes, escorted by the knights, armed with descendant swords, who regularly patrolled the routes. You two look lost, Lozan said, as she arrived in front of them. Her aura was well hidden in order to not scare them, but the two blinked. Her mana was now in its normal mana state. But just in case, Lumuf followed behind, invisible. We are. The two looked at each other and then back at her. They looked like they had something to say to the elven domain holder, but couldn't actually spit it out. I see. Then come with me, the elven domain holder said and tossed them some food. You two must be hungry. How many days have you been walking? Only a few hours, I guess. We were just sitting in our buses on the way home, when there was a moment where a truck looked like it was going to smash into us, the boy said. Wait, I'm Perry. And this is my girlfriend, Sandra. What's your name? Lozan smiled. It was all so familiar. Lozan. Now, did you meet a guy who said? Sandra blinked and nodded furiously. Yes. There was this strange lady in a white robe that spoke to us. She claimed that we have been summoned to be heroes. But Perry laughed. I don't feel very heroic. Do you? Sandra nodded along. Yeah, I'm hungry. Lozan thought of easing them into the whole hero thing, so didn't want to shock them with flying dragons and all that yet. There was a carriage waiting for them nearby. It was good to talk to them on the way to the nearest town, which was just a few hours away by horse. The first 3 days with the heroes, we mostly tried to learn about them. They were still horrified that they died and were thus transmigrated to another world, but, as with most heroes, they found their footing surprisingly quickly. First, let's start with spars. Lozan said, as she guided the two new heroes for a spar. It was nostalgic. Harris and that batch of heroes had a spar with Lozan too, when they first arrived. The nearest town was a small one, also with its own little hero sword. Lozan, Lumuf, and a few domain holders had rented out a few of the empty homes to use as a base of operations, while they practiced. The world of Kaval had some old traditions with heroes. Most of them involved a recharging step, where the new hero recharged the hero swords and asked for their blessings, often in the form of getting a copy of that hero sword. As expected, they improved tremendously, guided by an innate talent. Or perhaps, a talent guided by the hero class. On that very same day, their hero class hit level 5, they got their growing hero swords. Mine's a lightning sword. So cool, Perry said and got to swing it around. It's a level 1 hero sword, lightning. Sandra's power was strangely, hero sword, dark. Her attire and makeup had a strong, darker color, but it was strange that she had a dark element weapon. When she demonstrated them, they were more like death energy, but without the undead parts. Interesting. We didn't detect the class detail of the hero when we examined the hero swords already placed on Kaval. Perhaps, when the hero died, the hero swords transformed into a different state. At low levels, the hero sword's power was decent, comparable to a weapon made by someone level 50 or so. But the speed of this increase was the same as the heroes. They gained levels as long as they battled. Some days, they gained 3 to 5 levels in a day. For Lozan, it was intimidating watching how fast they improved. But Lozan was not just someone around level 50 to 60 anymore. Today, she was a domain holder with star mana powers of her own, so she kept up. In both speed and decades of lived experience as a warrior, she could match and exceed them as she sparred. Anyone else would have found it strange, but for Sandra and Perry, their frame of reference was Lozan. And Lozan learned powers from heroes, and that was where she encountered the first limitation of her domain. It didn't teach her spells or skills that were generic, but made stronger by star mana. That meant she didn't learn to cast certain generic spells that Colette or Prabhu could use or regular skills like Shield, used by Adrian. They were normal spells, just made extremely powerful with star mana and also the hero class. But, if they picked up Heroic Punch or something of that sort, Lozan could copy it perfectly, though its strength would then be dependent on her own stats and levels. Similarly, she could learn both of their hero sword variants, but she did not demonstrate any of their hero-derived abilities. That said, I also viewed it as a strength. It meant she also could empower her own set of generic abilities and make them into a star mana enhanced version. As they got more confident, Lausanne guided them towards the various demonic spawns and led them to visit the various hero swords using their status as heroes. We learned that though all the locals were tremendously respectful when they were present, there was an undertone of pity. The knights knew, perhaps from their long history, that the heroes of Cabal frequently died in battle. There were very few centuries where heroes lived beyond 2 demon kings. It was a feeling we knew well, and one we saw on other worlds. It took about 2 weeks for them to reach level 50. Another month to reach level 70. But we knew, at least from experience, that this speed would slow down dramatically. How are they? Stella asked while she explored the other worlds. I still feel bad for robbing them from their homeworld. Maybe, the accident wouldn't have happened if the hero summon didn't happen. Eon theorized that in any sufficiently large world, like Earth, with billions of people, there will be hundreds if not thousands of children dying in car accidents every day. They may not actually avoid summoning anyone extra, but just pick from those who recently died. I feel like that's just an excuse, though I suppose Eon should ask the administrators that question. Lumoof chuckled, as the two reached a barren world. There were a string of barren worlds that seemed to have contained life at some point in their life, but now were stripped bare. The core was largely hollowed out. It was a strange miracle that it had not collapsed yet. It didn't have the special star mana when a world was on the verge of collapsing. But Stella left a marker anyway. A little device she created filled with her void mana, meant to signal to her on the state of the world. In this period of peace, we wanted to reach the other gods. Maybe, together, we could end the demons for good. Failing that, we hoped to at least remove its current, world-destroying form and reduce it to a regional threat. Maybe then we would have a war between the gods. Maybe that's why the demons were created. Somewhere far away and a long time ago, a god got tired of the war between the gods and created an enemy so powerful that all of them had no choice but to unite against it. Let's keep moving. Level 100. The heroes said, as they unlocked their star mana forms. All heroes reached this state eventually, a form where all their normal mana was replaced by the overpowered star mana, and interestingly, the hero swords were also at the same level. In their current state, the hero swords were incredibly powerful weapons, but we also noticed a large, glaring weakness. They drained the hero's star mana extremely quickly. The hero swords on their own did not generate any star mana, so it drained all of it from their source, the hero. A part of it was stored within the sword itself, never to be used. No, that wasn't right. We believed the hero swords were designed to survive beyond the heroes, so it had sequestered away some of these star mana for future use. Sandra and Perry didn't think about it. They couldn't. The way they processed the world was at a surface level. Their minds, increasingly, as they gained levels, became obsessed with the Demon King. I could feel it. Perry screamed one night, waking up from bed in the inn somewhere closer to the Demon King. It's calling me. Sandra nodded. Her face was unnaturally nervous and pale. Lausanne nodded. At level 100, there was a switch in their mind that kicked in and drove them towards the Demon King. Their goal. She had to sit them down. Perry, Sandra, drink this. A powerful tea made from my leaves temporarily helped them calm down and helped them regain their mind. The tea worked well. You two are not the only heroes. That made both of them gasp. What? Where are the others? Well, they are on other worlds. One of the questions we had in mind, at least with the other heroes, was simply, when do we introduce the other heroes to this group of new heroes? Eventually the consensus was when they reached level 100. Because of star mana, Colette hoped that any new hero should feel that they were joining them as equals, not as junior heroes. I thought that this was a bit of wisdom from Colette, who clearly understood that some of the new heroes did feel a little intimidated by Colette and Prabhu, who were close to level 150 as mage heroes. The speed at which heroes gained level all plateaued past level 120 or so. At that point, it seemed that the gods judged that they didn't need more power, so the effects of the blessings faded. The gods didn't want their medicine to be too strong. But for now, the heroes didn't need to know that. My node tree on Caval was placed in a town with no hero swords. It used to have one, but then the hero sword was destroyed in a strange event, perhaps, as a result of overuse. So, it was a town that was almost abandoned. The two new heroes made their way there and were finally introduced to the rest of the heroes. And now at level 100, the two new heroes added to the hero's journal. I felt it gain even more power, as if that journal was at the verge of gaining some kind of sentience. Its stronger presence encased itself in a cocoon of powerful star mana. I wondered what would happen if a few more heroes added to it. But with the knowledge and whatever contained within that hero's journal, Sandra and Perry were reinvigorated, and their soul grew. They were now a bit more than before. The Demon King died a few weeks after that, killed by the two. Two more new heroes now joined our quest towards the end. 325. Lull. Year 292. This year was a quiet lull for me. For those living in the various worlds, it was perhaps a busy time. Twinspace's reclamation of the cursed continent continued with great fervor, buoyed by the promise of great wealth and resources. The rush was in full swing, and for those familiar with Earth medieval history, it was similar to the age of colonization with one difference. There were no natives to conquer and only demons to kill. In the future, mayhaps this cursed continent would grow more powerful than the old world where the settlers came from. The results spoke for themselves, and the credibility of our temple was only enhanced. Hoya, at this point, began to preach about the duties of managing wealth and resources. The wealth and resources would first go to improving their living condition up to a point, but after that they should prepare for the return of the Demon King. Duty. Twinspace likely had a 20 to 30 year cycle, similar to the other peripheral worlds. In the blink of an eye, all the wealth they built now could be easily lost. The promise of prosperity had a price, and that price was service. The Temple of Eon had a challenging, but not unfamiliar task of transforming and guiding their flock to perform the service asked of them. I believed Hoya and her team would deliver. For the remaining worlds, it was largely normal. The order continued to grow on each, and we worked on training more members for the coming war. The heroes trained, practiced, but most of the time, they lived their lives pursuing their own interests. For both Perry and Sandra, once the effects of the hero class was suppressed, it brought back old habits. Games, reading, entertainment and music. The two were a pair, and yet I felt they were quite different. Perry was a lot more into sports and was eager to learn about the various types of sports available in this world of magic. Naturally competitive, he was quick to pick up local types of sports that didn't rely on magical abilities, though his supernatural stamina gave him an advantage others didn't have. Sandra, on the other hand, was a lot more introverted and preferred more individual activities. Reading, entertainment, and the sort. It didn't take long for the rest of the heroes to notice that their relationship as a couple from their old world likely would not last very long. But as long as they were cooperative and did not create trouble, I didn't see a need to intervene into their personal affairs. Year 293. The White Shores was a place I often felt strange to return to. Finally, they would now face a Demon King. You can tell where it arrives. The white statue said, as 5 of the domain holders arrived. Lumuf, Edna, Kafa, Rune and Johan. Right now, it was a gigantic marble statue that somehow teleported from location to location, but this ability is dependent on a stone platform being in place. And your numbers grow. As it should. Lumuf answered. It is a war of attrition, after all. The white statue looked at both Lumuf and Edna, and then back at where the whirl of demonic energy gathered. The White Empire's forces had handily dealt with the rest of the demons that bothered the Empire, and what was left was only the final piece of the puzzle. Just like us, they had got it quite figured out. We would like to see you in action. Lumuf said, as we figured the white statue was a person that we should deal with in truths and facts. We had brought a little separated component of the white statue to the demon worlds through our void mages, but now, we wished to see its strength. You wish to see how I fit into your army and where I can be useful. That is a legitimate reason, and so I shall deliver my part. Yes. Lumuf nodded, as the Demon King landed. It was a large creature that had a body of a muscular lizard, with large spikes and interestingly, glowing crystal streaks throughout its body. Those crystal streaks emitted a strong magical beam that started firing the moment it detected our presence. The white statue glowed briefly, as it then transformed into an almost living being. It was no longer a statue, but instead, took the form of an old, bearded man with the body of a muscular wrestler covered in olive oil that was 3 stories tall and surrounded by a golden halo of power. A statue that came to life to protect their people. The white statue punched with great strength and moved quickly. The stone man wrestling a monster reminded me of old myths from our home world. But in terms of power, it wasn't hard to tell where it stood. This white statue's form wouldn't win on its own. That much was clear, but it could deal tremendous damage and even slow down the Demon King enough that the white statue could return to finish the job with another statue form. For added power, we noticed it had additional artifacts and items that granted it some extra punch in every hit. It had an array of amulets that were clearly hero items, and it gave the white statue a protective shield to take hits from the Demon King. The giant wrestler and the demon king fought for a while, but we saw enough. Edna didn't need to say it, but we knew that Edna was stronger than the white statue in combat. It affirmed what we knew about the white statue. It probably chose a slightly more survivable skill set such as the statue regeneration so that it could win after enough battles. Edna and Lumuf both decided it was appropriate to assist. We will now step in. The Demon King died under the might of my power and Edna's attacks. You've gained a level. The white statue seemed to have got the note. I appreciate the assistance. The destruction of the nearby towns has been avoided. In normal times I believe it would be in my third battle before I brought that creature down, and there's about 2 to 3 weeks before I could battle again. I see more merit in my offer to assist you in the battle against the demons and wish to reiterate my intention to join. I understood. It would not be a full alliance. Instead, a mutual assistance arrangement, and if it so volunteered, the white statue would assist us in battles against the demons. We also wanted to know whether it had any expansionary tendencies and intention, and we asked it. It did. Yes. If the wider world is as rotten as you say it is, our presence in these worlds will help. These worlds would benefit from regimented tasks, organization, and the excess resources of my world. Likewise, the philosophers and leaders of my people should be able to learn from these worlds. It is a mutually beneficial arrangement. Stella had earlier made it clear she didn't like this. We were facilitating colonialism, even if for the right reasons. The white statue seemed to sense our concerns. Our ways may differ, but our intent is to help. At the moment, you have a right to dictate who you choose to assist, but the wider world deserves more than just one type or method of assistance. I trust my men, and I know that with my influence, they will act in the way they should. Some worlds would benefit from the presence of me and my people, more than yours. When we encounter such worlds, I ask that our views are fairly heard and debated, rather than be outright denied. Stella was traveling and hopping through worlds, in search of more worlds to join us in our battle. Even so, the white statue's request was reasonable enough. I did not disagree with hearing them out on a case-by-case basis. For the world of Kabur, the Demon King came and went. It died the day it arrived, my domain holders eager for more experience and levels. The Osroids said nothing, and for the human-inhabited side of Kabur, it was as if nothing happened. We spoke with Gideon, the hero of Osroids once more. He remained unwilling to leave and instead preferred to tend to his family. So, we gave him space. There was no need for us to impose a duty on someone who did not want it, when we had other options. Year 294. Time ticked on by. We didn't have demon kings this year, though demons did appear in a few more worlds. Year 295. 3 worlds faced the brunt of the demons. Terrace, the land of the floating islands. Gyroworld, the world with the 3 rings. Delvegard, with the demons. Delvegard was of most interest to me, because it was where we would see the difference in how the world fared. The presence of the demons awakened an old fear in the dwarves. Their arrival littered the world with the presence of rift gates, and the demons were poisonous, infested creatures that resembled giant apes carved out of swamp stuff. They radiated a thick poisonous fog as it walked. The last few years, we had significantly slowed down our recruitment of the dwarves, simply because we had gotten most of those we wanted, and there was no point growing if those present were not properly incorporated into a fighting force. Recruitment shifted to training, and the dwarves that joined the order were eager to prove their worth. So, armed with knowledge and training and most importantly, anti-demonic combat experience, they returned to Delvegard to save their fellow dwarves. Many had gained levels in the long war on Darkguard against the demons of the demon-controlled world. Here, the Darkguardian dwarves proved their worth as a coherent, experienced, and united fighting force. Those who joined us could tell how we saved life. How they freely moved from location to location unhindered by the silly boundaries and lines drawn on maps by the local dwarven lords and kings. The locals' defense force would not step out of their own territory to save others. The local rulers were quick to blame the vanished dwarves as the cause for the suffering. That those that chose to fight the Great War left them defenseless. But at this point, even those who chose to stay behind to work for the existing dwarven lords could tell that those claims were untrue. They knew they were helping, because with the aid of void mages and also regular teleportation magic, they crushed the demons as soon as they arrived with overwhelming force. Their gigantic war machines deployed to do battle against demonic champions. It worked well. The Demon King came and died. Just to showcase how different the ways we could fight against the Demon King, we demonstrated to the Dark Guardian dwarves how we triangulated the Demon King's arrival location and planted large quantities of magical mines. The explosion significantly softened the creature, where it was then finished off by the level 140 Valthorns, and also my domain holders. No one got their domain. Not yet. We repeated the affair in Gyroworld and killed the Demon King there too. An average Demon King, as it went. Then, we redirected our attention to the Demon King of Terrace. The world of the floating islands imposed its unusual laws on the presence of the Demon King, and then, a massive demonic island loomed overhead above everyone else. Smaller islands then emerged that created a series of steps that connected the various islands together. It was an unusual law of the realm that indirectly protected the floating islands from the full wrath of the demons. Forcing all the demons' arrivals onto a specific island, and then, the demons would have to travel normally from that island down into the other islands. The three great empires of Terrace raised armies. Fleets of flying ships armed with magical weapons to guard their segment of territory from the demon kings. It was beautiful, and we allowed it to play out for a bit, only to see how things happen in this world. After we'd seen enough, we sent our forces in to destroy the Demon King. A part of me wondered what would happen if someone other than the hero defeated the Demon King on a world with magical laws such as the floating islands. But luckily nothing much happened. The Demon King died, and the island that was once the demonic island began to drift. It was much higher up, vertically, above all the other islands, which were largely confined to a small horizontal plane. Once the Demon King died, the laws that held its place loosened, and it moved. It drifted to the very edges of the world, where it then crumbled and separated into multiple smaller demonic islands. I suspected that the floating islands world was thus fairly young, since it had a mechanism that used the Demon Kings as a trigger for the creation of new islands. Our presence on Terrace, the world of the floating islands, was in the form of a recruitment office, and for now, we chose to remain largely hidden. We operated by locating talented individuals and directly offering them a chance to try something different. Naturally, this was viewed with suspicion. Year 296. Time passed. A few more decades to tick on. I wondered what was behind the veil. What sort of retaliation awaited us? What sort of demons do you face? I asked Hawa. I wanted to know what we had to deal with. The comet is a common one. I deal with a comet every 1 or 2 centuries. Other than that, I do not know. When I was a much younger god, there were tales of more powerful types of demon kings, but I have not seen them. Perhaps, they are chained to the worlds that created them. What was it like? That era. It is very much like today. Only denser. The old gods used to be able to speak to each other. Before we all drifted too far apart. But even though we could speak to each other, I could count our interactions with one hand. In fact, I believe our interactions with each other far surpassed my interactions with the old gods. Why? Why not? Our powers allow us to hide away. Why didn't you hide away? Perhaps, boredom. Hawa answered bluntly. Eons passed, only for more of the same. I appreciate that I helped sat your boredom. At the very least, you offer a chance for real change. Wait a bit more, the weapon will be ready in slightly over a decade. I know. I closed my senses, albeit temporarily. I shut out all the inputs. Silence. I saw, in visions, the worlds then passed me by, as if they were nothing more than little iterations of various scenes from my past, played out in slightly different variations. Weapons made, powers stored. The time approached for us to venture into the demon's realm. 326. Lull 2. 326. Year 297. On Triatuga, the Order expanded their influence in the human kingdoms, while they prepared to wage war against the Fairies. The Fairies, unfortunately, were hostile and did not regard the demons as a problem. They saw us, the Order, as an affront to their entire way of life. They were used to Fairies at the top of their social order and political order, and so they did not consider any other option than to declare us enemies. Enemies that they killed on sight. That was a shame. I didn't like destroying entire races, but if many of them were hostile, I would have to enforce some form of quarantine on them. Alternatively, I could step away from Triatuga. I didn't really need to deal with them. They have no ability to hurt me directly, only my people on their planet. Year 298. Demon Kings. At this point I had lost count how many battles I participated in. It didn't quite matter anymore. I wasn't really gaining levels from them. Even if Lumuf stood against a Demon King with no assistance, we were at the point where we just were not gaining levels. I wondered, briefly, whether my resurrection ability significantly affected how they gained experience. After all, if you could restart endlessly, would that actually reflect the overall real difficulty of the task? Patrick and my artificial minds quickly put the data points together, and from a high-level estimate, there seemed to be some difference. A slight, not particularly large difference in the rate of experience gained before and after the resurrection domain ability. Magical research was a continuous, never-ending affair. Every day there were hundreds of order mages and crafters who were dedicated to the art of creating stronger, more powerful weapons and tools for our expansion. Often, as a side effect of this pursuit of more powerful tools and equipment, the research led to accidental discoveries that would help improve the quality of life of the average citizen. Supplements were one of these improvements. The military used supplements to improve physical strength, memory, and all the other stuff. In the very early days of New Freaka, we had started with special mixtures of juices that helped improve survivability in young infants and saplings. It was a practice that caught on, and now there were various guilds and industries trying to sell some kind of magical serum that could improve their physical strength and abilities beyond what their normal levels. Such marketing propaganda often stepped too far, and the order had to step in to quell malicious, outright exploitative marketing. Despite this, the use of such magical elixirs proliferated. Even in the old days, alchemists and potion makers made brews that had temporary mental effects, though they were often reserved for the elite who had a test or something extra. There was a point within the Freshlands Treaty College where the chancellor of the college had to regulate the use of such stimulants. It was strangely a city thing. Demand for such additional boosts to their abilities was often a result of a dense, hyper-competitive environment. The fact that the Order's own elites used these types of supplements extensively under the watch and supervision of an army of druids, healers and mages, and also the presence of my familiars was often forgotten. Most of these elixirs were often diluted versions of more powerful, often, rare materials created by highly skilled alchemists. Adventurers, who still regularly ventured into various dungeons all over Treehome, were often engaged by the various alchemical guilds to procure more raw materials for their lucrative supplements and stimulant trade. All in search of that extra bit of advantage. Patrick observed that there was a particular trend of consuming such things especially among individuals around level 80 and those who had not received a level-breaking seed, both within the order and also in external individuals. Those close to that barrier needed something beyond their levels. The dungeons, many of them created through magical ley lines of Treehome's core, continued to generate treasure. The mages that studied the dungeons of Treehome, Mountainworld, and Three Worlds, connected our discovery of Treehome's sister planet, Shrubhome, and concluded that dungeons functioned as a lesser version of the world's creation process. The dungeons went through an additional step, but I believe the reason why we could not look into the nature of a dungeon was due to the presence of these void shenanigans. Even now, in dungeons that I created with my ability, I could not observe them directly, but instead only influence their content through the parameters defined by my ability. Extending that idea, Shrubhome was a creation that existed within the void, and through some system shenanigans, it was created into the world. Dungeons, who were connected to the planet's core via the magical ley lines, seemed to tap into the same effect to generate monsters, treasures, and plants. These things that did not exist before were spawned. It made me wonder whether we could trust the histories of anything that were found in dungeons, due to their generated nature. Are we all living in some kind of gigantic universe-sized dungeons, and it was just more dungeons whichever direction we went? We knew from the void layers that worlds existed in these great primordial soup as a work in progress, and there were keys. Thus, were the layer barriers we faced the way to exit to the higher layer of the dungeon. Anyway, I digressed. These dungeons generated multiple oddities, and what was produced within them continued to evolve over time, even if the change was minuscule at first. Over the decades, my minds noticed that the dungeon began to generate objects that were created about 3 to 5 decades ago. Copies of old objects could be found, replicas discovered by the adventurers. Replicas, with real powers and abilities. Yet, I knew they were not the real creation, because my artificial minds had seen the real things destroyed. It suggested that the system retained memory of all things, both past and present, and possibly, even the future. The multiverse had repetitions in methods, but at different scales. Dungeons generated smaller things. Objects, artifacts, planets and realms generated monsters. Terrain, people. Then the Void Sea itself generated entire planets from nothing. Then, was there something even bigger than the Void Sea? You're going off track again. Lumuf said as he somehow tapped into my idle musings. I was on a routine review of all the various developments throughout the world. Just like the use of supplements, the development of entertainment mediums and communication methods now encourage the development of more powerful ways of transferring information from one place to another. One of the recent great inventions in the field of communication was something called the twinned pendulum. It was a magical object where both pendulums would swing at the same speed and movement. Moving one would result in the other being moved and vice versa. After a message was sent, it would revert to a default state. It was enabled by the discovery and incorporation of the sunmetals from Delvegard into the crafts of TreeTree. In other words, the movement of the pendulums could be used to encode messages, in a form of ultra-fast communication. The twinned pendulum linked to a machine that interpreted position and swing based on a pre-agreed code, and thus, messaging. Without having to use someone with the special skills or the magical spell, message, it was now possible to enable communication. It didn't work outside of the same realm, however. The magic that entangled the two objects together only worked when both existed in the same realm and could not pierce through the void sea. The order was suspicious, at first. For the order, the operatives relied on the artificial minds to transmit messages to each other. The artificial minds often required an interface, usually someone with a familiar of mine or a druid, who could send their message via my rootnet. This gave comparable speed to the pendulum communications network. Even the mages themselves used message, or for many others, they relied on magical artifacts that helped communication with each other. But alternatives had value, and the new magic technology, even in its current rudimentary state, the length of message of what could be sent and what could be sent through these pendulums were limited. Still, I saw that it was a precursor to the telecommunications era. The magical equivalent of that moment in time when telegraphs first appeared. The ability to send Morse code through copper wires. The level 60 craftsman and his workshop that made these objects didn't even see the value at first, but the merchants who were eager for an advantage in the trading markets and wanted to exploit price differentials between locations could imagine its potential uses. For the various guilds, the current methods of communication were not a great arrangement. Painful, even. Their current process employed mages, in various capacities, to deliver messages. A process that often resulted in leakage and corruption. Even if they were kept in their personal employ, mages were already an expensive resource to train and maintain, and having multiple mages in each of a merchant guild's multiple trading locations was prohibitively expensive. Mages also would shift employers regularly, and that ate into merchant profits. In short, mages were not loyal and moved to where they made most profits. They were also flighty as independent contractors, since they enjoyed some variety in their work. Most mages did not enjoy the mundanity of trade and merchant work and so used their freedom to take on other roles, sometimes as adventurers. Often, without notice. So, it was the same few guilds that started the guild wars that hopped wholesale and began constructing networks based on these twinned pendulums or paired pendulums. They were known as the ball networks, because the message was sent by manipulating the magically paired metallic balls, and these were then linked to machines. The upfront cost was hefty, but maintaining and using them was a breeze. Merchants, for one, were incentivized to cut off mages from their operations. The order could still indirectly control the entire industry, since the shipment of these raw materials, sunmetals and sunsteels from Delvegard, was entirely in our hands. Their lightweight, magically attuned properties was what enabled the creation of these sunmetal ball networks. There were hiccups, of course. The messaging process had to be refined to ensure that the message that got through was correct. The merchants themselves had to be trained how to use and store them correctly. They were also not tested for magical storms and interference, though they had functioned during regular storms. But these were the start. Sunmetals of Delvegard, these magically superconductive materials, would be the start of the communications revolution on TreeTree. I believe it would take decades of greater research, as they worked out how to miniaturize these currently relatively large metal pendulum setups. In these simple things I saw potential for a change quite like my homeworld. The swift destruction of the Demon King on Delvegard was inspiring for the Dark Guardians, and now, we ventured to Darkguard to reclaim that world back from the demons. Darkguard, the world connected to Delvegard, had a mostly unguarded core, and Alka wanted it to be a safe new world for the dwarves. There was some apprehension. Darkguard didn't have sunmetal in its current state, and the large majority of Delvegardian war machine technology relied on these sunmetals. But, a home was a home, and we attacked anyway. The demon mother that lurked in the core of the world didn't last very long against Lumuf or Alka. Death came quickly, and the core was freed. Lumuf, thus, connected to Darkguard. The vision started with worlds of dwarves. Not one but many. Many other dwarven worlds, each with their own special metals and steels. There were dead dwarves deep underground, and with humans. A hollowed out world, a world that looked more like a carcass with broken innards. A world of steel. 1. Then 2. Then 3. Then the demons came, and the cores of the worlds were ordered to break itself apart. 3 worlds cracked, forced apart by the demons. Then, I saw a location and then another. 2 places in my star map, each another part of itself. Darkguard was part of a world with 3 planets, but somehow it had cracked apart. The location glowed within my astral map, as if updated by the system itself. In short, Darkguard wasn't just Darkguard, but Darkguard I, Darkguard 2 and Darkguard 3. There are 2 other planets that belong to Darkguard. Alka frowned as he realized that there seems to be a series of dwarven-centric worlds. So there seems to be an early dwarven god. That supposes that there are early elven gods as well. Hawa's response was noncommittal when we probed. It seemed to be a story that could not be verified. These races came before I came to be. Humans, dwarves, elves, and the many other human-derived races that are occasionally called the dreamed races. They are the dreams of the great primordial void. The first gods came to be, according to the legends, before the world faith system or the demons, and are more like forces of nature melded together by the raw power. They emerged as champions of the first races, some as dreams of the first worlds, and many of them, like animals eager for territory, fought each other to death. Perhaps Gaia would know the tale. Gaia was the oldest of us, but even he came after the first gods. But there are patches where these races are dominant. Elves and their long-lived ilk. Dwarves and their dark, industrious worlds. But beware of the dwarves. It is said that dwarves are those closest to the demons and are perhaps their distant ancestors. We met the Boar folks. Hawa's memory was strangely disjointed, as if separated by its nature. Creatures that can connect to the demons came to be, made from the dried, ashened lands. There is an old tale from when I was a young god, that the dwarves are the children of the land, molded from primordial dirt and metal. Unlike the elves who are carved out of the first trees, are men, who are cut out from the first primordial beasts. Is that a fact? I do not know. The nature of the void is that there are many truths, and many of these truths are true in some places and false in some other places, all at the same time. Perhaps one old god made it one way, and another god made them another way. Their origins do not matter, but they exist out there, and their worlds have strange metals, many of these relics of the older worlds. Why do they not exist everywhere? I countered. The nature of the void sea didn't prevent these metals from occurring naturally. I believe they do. It is just so rare that we don't find them. Their intense presence in these old worlds was the act of the old gods. They desired special metals for their world, just as how you made special woods for your people. I was surprised by that last statement, but then, I realized that many of my Valthorns carried some of my unique equipment, made and derived from my flesh and wood. Hawa must have seen them as we passed through his territory. The demons clearly made use of these unique metals. The sun rings were made with a strange metal, which we theorized was some kind of sunsteel alloy. So, there was some reasonable evidence to support the idea that demons might be some kind of dwarven god's creation. Could it be that the god in the demon's prison was really Eras? Or was the demon just something that came to control Eras? Thus, by extension, it gained power over dwarven-linked abilities and claimed dwarven technologies and alloys as its own. A captured dwarven god. Alka wrote on a record. That seems to be the most likely theory at the moment. It's been long theorized, but I am uncertain. Eras was around long before the demons appeared, and even after the demons, Eras was still around. Hawa countered. Eras is not the first or only dwarven god, either, and during the old era, Eras himself would not want to be referred to as a dwarven god. Eras' craft is open to all, not only dwarves. The creation of machines is one all can adopt. It was a conversation that led nowhere. Well, since we have these new locations, it makes it a lot easier to find them. Stella said. Let's free these 2 worlds. I'm pretty sure we can hack the rift gates to use these new coordinates. The rift gates hummed. I need a little more power. It's too far. No worries. A few days of void mana charging later, we tried again. Well, there we go. Having coordinates is sure handy as hell. There's no way we can brute force the coordinates with how much void mana it costs to test each coordinate, Stella said, and then the rift gate hummed. This time, the hum continued and finished with a loud connection sound, as if 2 cymbals were slammed together. The rift gate was active. The void mage was happy that the coordinate system finally led somewhere. Well, what are we waiting for? Lumuf, Alka, and a few others looked at the swirling rift gate. It led us to Darkguard 2, a world located a long way from us. So far that it was pretty much on the other side of the demon's territory. 327. Faraway World's Eye. 327. Year 298. Alright, let's review our options. Should we try and expand into these new worlds? Lumuf placed the problem on the metaphorical table. Stella's exploration brought about 2 more additional new worlds distant from the existing series of worlds that appeared to be under heavy demonic attack but were still largely surviving, and in addition, there were also the 2 Darkguard-linked worlds, Darkguard 2 and Darkguard 3. Then, Olivia, the High Priestess of Hawa, shared 2 more new peripheral worlds. Peripheral worlds 16th and 17th. All in, we had about 6 more worlds to explore. We can sit around and wait for the time to tick. As it is, our forces and domain holders are stretched. Manpower on all our worlds is tight, and so the teams now extensively rely on local resources. Training of new operatives is going well, but it'll take time. We can wait another 3 to 5 years, we should have more people to deploy then. The Order, as of now, was a large, sprawling organization with over 5 million members and included many, many more under the auspices of the various temples. But, the seemingly large 5 million was then spread out over multiple worlds and continents. About half of these 5 million were non-combatants. Crafters, mages, researchers, builders, academy teachers and combat trainers, priests and social workers who helped ensure that the Order was positively perceived by most of the population, and even bankers. The central continent alone hosted about 1.5 million of these non-combatants. Even the Valtrian Bank itself had about 200,000 employees spread over thousands of cities. Most of these were mid-leveled individuals. Those around the level 50 to 100 formed the mass of the Order's bureaucracy, and they handled all the routine tasks. Arranging shipments, collecting data. Many of them worked together and were augmented by my artificial minds. In these new worlds, my artificial minds' reach was limited. My node trees hampered the level of access and data trees could collect, and the connection between artificial minds and these faraway worlds was weak. For the bulk of my forces, quite unlike domain holders who shared a pantheon and thus gained direct access to my artificial minds, the rest of them formed the links to their mental assistants through familiars, and that connection just couldn't carry as much data and was much less responsive. It was the Earth equivalent of my domain holders having a gigabit connection to a nearby data center, and the rest of my Order operatives connecting through much lower quality connections. The Order operatives who had to make do with what little they had, and as conditions improved, they would find themselves supported with more resources. Alternatively, if the need was high, then I could deploy a clone. It was quite like deploying a powerful data center in a previously unserved region. A huge commitment, but sadly, a limited one. My clone slots were limited. The 2 peripheral worlds shave 3 years off the waiting time. Johann suggested. It's hardly worth the effort. We can wait 3 years easily. It's more of whether these worlds are worth the effort. Then let's just explore them and leave it at that. So, Darkguard 2 and Darkguard 3. I've done a simple survey of the 2 new worlds, which is why I brought it up. I suspect there may be more domain holders on them, or at least, something more powerful, which is why they survived so far. That sounds like they have it sorted out. We should leave it as it is. If there's something, we can at least lend a hand and move on. Stella decided to add a title, Farworld, to some of these faraway worlds to denote them as different from the peripheral worlds. The 2 new worlds, Farworld Celestar and Farworld Kayeka. That sounds agreeable, Edna said. Go in, clean up the demons without taking a position. Hoya disagreed. We will encounter people who need help. People who need structure, order, and purpose amidst the chaos. Even in the best case scenario, we will have to maintain some presence, however minuscule. Once Twinspace clears up, I should have some priests too. I think the zealots of Twinspace should be kept where they are. Johann countered. Johann wasn't a fan of the zealots, a position some people of the Order agreed with. Not everyone wanted to be associated with the zealous. Zealots can be educated and changed, Johann. Hoya's voice sounded a little annoyed. It is not right to confine them to Twinspace when their fervor can be so helpful elsewhere. There are those zealots who can do great things. Passion and strong belief is only a problem when it is misguided. Lumuf agreed. We cannot avoid integration forever, especially if they need to work with the rest of the Order on the other worlds. Might as well start small. I trust Matriarch Hoya's ability to choose the right people for the job. Johann relented with Lumuf's support. Very well. Within the Order, the clone worlds were all technically the primary worlds since moving between them was effortless, and my presence ensured that they could operate with most of the Order's machinery within easy reach. The node worlds were then the secondary ranked worlds, where it took a little more effort to deploy the Order's machinery, and they had to make up for the lack of my clone tree's abilities. Then, there were the true, faraway worlds. Worlds linked only by portals and portals alone. Alka then spoke up on behalf of Darkguard. The dwarves want to set off for Darkguard 2 and Darkguard 3. The Delveguardians somehow view these other dwarven origin worlds as something of a kindred spirit and would like to help them. Deploying the dwarves of Delveguard to expand to these worlds would help them buy into their story. The dwarves were fascinated that there were people who shared their blood across the stars. Administratively, the domain holders could provide input on their subjects through my mental connection. Even if there was a need to fight demon kings, I could rely on my pantheon and familiar abilities to pull them back instantly. If the sealed god is that of a dwarven god, this track of exploration could lead us to figure out what happened. Not all demon worlds thoroughly eradicate their native population. We should still be able to find old ruins left behind to understand what happened. Alka advocated expansion to Darkguard 2 and 3. I would like to lead this exploration. The domain holders chatted with each other briefly, but I was in agreement. Understanding how the demon's prison came to be could help us figure out how to properly unravel it. It was a wild shot, but the fact that this world was on the other side of the demonic patch of space was also a big plus point. This could lead us very much closer to the other gods. In the end, the domain holders all agreed with some reluctance to do a sweep of these new worlds. Year 299. Treehome remained largely peaceful. Small wars and conflicts remained throughout the world, but this recent era of peace had significantly boosted trade and the overall wealth of the world. Alas, most of that remained concentrated within the central continent. The Order tried to share some of that prosperity with the rest of the continent, but it seemed that the local populace took their religion as some kind of shield. A large group seemed adamant to live in their own enclaves and areas, and with the help of some power-hungry lord, set up their own areas in the southern continent. They took advantage of Emperor Eranuel's absence to separate from the Holy Empire and went as far as claiming Emperor Eranuel's actions as heretical and contrary to the teachings of Hawa. That Emperor Eranuel was a heretical god. Naturally, the proper Hawa church denounced these claims, that Emperor Eranuel communed with Hawa himself on Hawa's worlds and thus is not a heretic. But with the Emperor focused on Shasan and the rest of the Holy Empire weak and fractured, they were in no state to wage a new war against these separatist factions. This led to a schism in the Hawa church. The royalists' Hawa followers and the anti-monarchist Hawa followers. Treehome was also home to two other domain holders. Arya and Ispeng and Lilies seemed quite content where they were, though I did notice they were digging deeper into the ground. They naturally prepared for a retaliation that even I could not handle. Lilies was really old, and they believed that even the dragons of old, with their immense might, could fall. It meant that even my current strength could fall. Arya, on the other hand, was just happy to use my avatar to explore some of the new worlds and live in our large cities. Three Worlds was doing well. We were recruiting talents from all three of the Three World factions. The Scorpionoids and Centaurs were both capable warriors in different ways, and though we still had some suspicions of their loyalties, in the end we considered them to be a net positive for the entire order. The Centaur society did not fully embrace us, but there were few Centaur clans that had formed alliances with the order and regularly sent their warriors to participate in training. Jonpu remained an ally and we spoke regularly. I sometimes updated him on the things we met across the other worlds, and it seemed that Jonpu would love to meet the Osroids one day. Both Jonpu and Osroids relied on something similar to death magic, though from my gut assessment, the Osroids were stronger than Jonpu by quite a margin, especially without Jonpu's magical pyramid. The Crystal King, still imprisoned by my magical tree, had stopped struggling. Instead, it withdrew and turned reclusive. Three Worlds' military and industrial output ticked up bit by bit every year, as they had a large previously untapped population, and over the past 3 to 4 decades we'd steadily transformed parts of the human lands and parts of the far north of my clone tree into a heavily industrialized area. These areas mainly produced high-quality basic to mid-tier equipment, rations, and tools, and also mid-tier to advanced magical equipment for use throughout the Order's operations. The human lands and Myelga specifically became home to the magical academies for the Order. The Order quickly took control of a few of the prominent academies and used these mage training institutions to feed the Order's constant need for mage recruits. Magic related to crystals, a resource commonly found on Myelga and some of the surrounding areas, was already an area that the human mages of Myelga excelled in. The long-existing histories of Myelga's mage academies actually gave them an older heritage than most of Treehome's magic schools. Right now, The Order's magical schools were mainly established on 4 worlds. Treehome's central continent was the location of a few hundred magical schools. 3 worlds Myelga and a few nearby cities was also home to about 20 magical schools. Mountainworld's Branchhold was where we had a fairly large magical school, and Magisar where the Hero Towers now also hosted about 15 magic schools. We did have smaller institutions on Tropicsworld and a few of the newer peripheral worlds, but these worlds were not in the position to add to the Order's strength yet. Maybe one day, we would be able to add Delvagard's various crafting institutions to our fold as well, but for now, we were content with just draining their brains by offering a much better deal behind the official rulers' backs. Branchhold was the largest, most prosperous city of Mountainworld, and over the past few decades, the Order used our neutral position and extensive power to indirectly control the various nations. Through a combination of espionage, trade, and corruption, we'd maneuvered politicians and leaders favorable to our cause into positions of power. After the first level 100 Mountainworld Order operatives a few decades ago, we'd since seen multiple other individuals reach level 100. Our current statistics estimated that it took about 50 to 60 years for someone to go from level 1 to level 100 under the Order's current training system, so it'd be a few more years when we would start seeing the first level 103 worlds native. It'd be even later for those from the faraway peripheral worlds. Faraway worlds, Celestar, Edna, Stella, and Rune stepped out of the portal and arrived in a land inundated by heavy storms. The skies rippled with lightning bolts of different colors, and the rain poured from the heavens relentlessly. So what did you find that brought us here? Edna said. I don't really know. My explorer arrived and I faintly detected the presence of something resembling a domain holder, but without being here ourselves, I didn't want to risk it. There's also too much of everything else for me to be very sure. Edna looked around, and then back at Rune. See anything? Nope. Rune answered and went back to looking. The storm clouds were thick, and seemed to go up much higher than most. And they were also partly magical. The land was muddy, and the vegetation looked as if they were close to buckling from the strong winds and also the weight of the rainwater. The clouds were filled with intense magic, as if the ley lines of the world found itself in the skies. Then, a flash of light. Lightning slammed down from one of those thunderclouds. Edna's magical shield buzzed with residual static even as the lightning faded. Well, death by lightning strike wasn't in my list of things to watch out for. Not as strange as that world of storms. But my senses are kinda messed up. Stella said. Edna realized that her own magical senses were filled with other things. Random bursts of magic. The land would rumble and shake every 10 to 20 minutes, as if there were a tremor in some faraway part of the world. The earth seems to shake all the time. I thought you'd surveyed the place. Just roughly. But I feel like there's a lot of places that could use a proper exploration force, with some power to back me up. Oh, Edna grinned. Well then, Princess, this knight shall escort you and keep you safe, wherever you go. Rune rolled his eyes. Ladies. Yes, yes, Edna said. So, a bit more. Stella led them to a gigantic mountain. It had a strange soil, not because of the soil itself, but because of the tremendous magical energies that flowed out of it. The soil was energized and its surface constantly formed into magical golems. These golems would walk for a bit, and then a stray lightning bolt would come down from the constant thunderstorms above and turn the golem into regular soil once more. The mountain also had a gigantic cave that had golden crystal walls. It created this path that glowed inwards. Well, that's an entrance. Edna blinked. I know. I stared at it, and I'm like, no. I can't go in alone. A wise choice. Edna teased. Let's see. Rune stared. I can't see a thing in there. The trio walked into the cave of golden crystals. There were, surprisingly, no defenders. They walked until they reached a single golden door that opened when they pushed. They felt a gust of divine wind when the door opened, and inside was a golden chamber, filled with multiple items, all radiating divine energy. The door closed behind them, and they felt the divine energy rippling outward from the main divine item at the heart of the golden chamber. A golden flower. It levitated on top of a pedestal and emitted a golden glow that lit up the entire chamber. Well, a treasury with divine relics. Edna said. I expected more defenders. A spirit emerged from the golden flower, and it took the form of a little human boy. Greetings, visitors, to the tomb of the dead god Zafar. A tomb of a dead god. Edna looked around. I do not see a corpse. You are on it, but this is where the last of its divine will faded away. Oh, when did Zafar die? The spirit stared, and spoke with borrowed divinity. I know not how much time passed elsewhere. But here, 262,000 years. Why did it die? The loss of faith. The spirit answered. A foul plot, coupled with the relentless tide of the demons. Zaphar's believers were stolen away, and what was left of Zaphar's true believers were destroyed. The friend that was supposed to come to its rescue did not. How does one plot against a god? Rune said, amused. The spirit did not answer. Edna looked around. So, this world, it is what's left of Zaphar. Yes. Zaphar fused with the world in hope to stem off the last of its losses, but it was too late. The loss of its other worlds was too much, and so, unable to maintain its divinity, here it spent the last of its divinity cursing the world to its eternal storm. Edna blinked. Then who made you? I am the last of Zaphar's high prophets and avatars, and here I collected my patron's last relics and made it his final resting ground. I felt my patron's fading divinity here, in this very room. Upon his death, I sacrificed myself to create the tomb in his honor. This world used to have people like you. Yes. But they should all be dead. My god's wrath and anger was too much. Edna nodded. I see. Let's leave. Wait. Who betrayed your god? Rune asked, a little curious. Ares. Did it? If Ares was imprisoned, was Ares a traitor? Or was the prison not really a prison, but instead a trap? A lure for the other gods to attempt to save Ares, only to be fooled by Ares himself, the real mastermind of the entire demonic scheme. Or, was Ares a victim of their own machinations, where the demons outsmarted their creator? Darkguard 2. A demon world was often similar to others, and the immediate sense one got as they stepped across the rift gate and landed on Darkguard 2 wasn't a demon world. Fire and brimstone, the skies filled with thick, blackened smog. There was no visibility for those seeing with regular eyes, and Alka had to immediately rely on magical vision to see through the smog. The grounds were bare and rough and covered in a thick layer of black ash. The air itself tasted like ash, with a hint of metal. Here, we witnessed a new type of demon. These demons were small, smaller than a human, but stronger, beefier. Its skin was black as if covered in decades of soot and smog. In short, they looked like dwarves, imagined as if they were half demons. Lumuf's wooden roots pierced one, and then we realized that these bodies were not purely demonic, but instead, they were like shells. Because the real mind of these smaller demons was a parasite within them. No, they were not a new type of demon. Instead, they were bodies bred to serve as vessels of demons. Burn them to hell. Alka cursed as he tore apart one of these demons just to see what's inside. A parasite wriggling within, thoroughly integrated to the outer shell as if it was one. We tore through multiple of these demons, and Lumuf tried to specifically target the demonic parasite. Killing the parasite left these bodies nothing more than just mindless biological automatons. This is a parasite world that infested a world of dwarves. Then we discovered the breeding pools where the demons cloned these dwarven bodies by the thousands. Large industrial-like facilities filled with hundreds if not thousands of liquid-filled sacks, each growing a body made of part metal and part flesh, supplied with resources from the terrain. Dwarven physical bodies turned into templates for parasitic hosts. These demon-possessed dwarves spoke to each other normally, somehow capable of speech. There were variations to these demonic dwarven husks, but at this point, it just repulsed us. They were all demons. The demons themselves were separately bred in their own demonic spawning pools, but the demonic parasite and their bodies were later introduced to each other. There were hundreds of them as we kept exploring the world. Everywhere we went we saw layers of soot and a world drained of all semblance of life, all to fuel the demonic army. They used real weapons, spawned from the metallic chambers, and it didn't take much to figure out that they were preparing for an invasion of another world. I had not imagined a total puppet state. Lumuf said. This is something else. Alka shook his head as he too struggled to contain his anger. He spent enough time with the Delveguardians to share in their respect for the Dwarven way. I can only imagine the Delveguardians wish to raze this world to the ground. Lumuf nodded along. I guess there are times where Eons' phrase, nuke it from orbit, is appropriate. Darkguard 2 was fairly uniform throughout its surface. The demonic parasites turned the entire world into a massive body factory, and they prepared to send this to wage war on other worlds. Enough, Alka said, holding back his deep anger. There was something so perverse about parasites pretending to be dwarves that made his blood boil, and the world resonated with the domain holder's rightful anger. We will deal with this later. My avatar tapped the dwarf on the shoulder. Let's go see the other world. 328. Faraway Worlds 2. Year 300. Darkguard 3. They didn't immediately wage war on Darkguard 2, even if Alka really wanted to. In the end, scouting and gathering information came first. Darkguard 3 was not covered in ash or soot. But instead, the entire place was dry. The ground was sandy, and the air was non-existent. As far as they saw, the skies were just burning white, and a white sun burned the world overhead. The sand was hot, so hot that the grains of sand were at the very edges of melting, but their magical protections prevented them from harming the two domain holders. We walked. It was a sea of sand as far as the eye could see. There were no mountains other than mounds of sand that were somehow higher than others. The winds of this place only brought hot, dry air. The sun also blasted strong waves of energy that messed with magic and confused our magical senses. For a tree like me, I didn't like this environment very much. I could imagine my roots drying out, my bark falling apart. But as we walked and walked, we noticed that the sun began to sink behind us, and the winds grew stronger. Colder. Then, the once hot sand gave way to warm dirt. More dirt. The hot winds were now cold. And it was a land of darkness. There, we saw fortresses filled with demons. These were not dwarven parasites like in Darkguard 2. Instead, the fortresses were filled with demonic spiders the size of cows with fangs the size of horns. The demons were not the problem. They couldn't detect us. Instead, what was interesting was the presence of relatively new corpses. This was a fairly recent fortress, with corpses that were probably a few years old. Dwarves. Alka sat as he examined a body. Regular dwarven kind fought, and somehow the body didn't rot. Instead, the body looked like it was desiccated. The face shriveled. It's the dry air, Lumuf said. The way the fortress was designed had included deep wells and tunnels. Let's search the tunnels. If the weather is so hostile, they are likely to be underground. Like Gyroworld, the demonic spiders clogged up the tunnels, but ultimately they were nothing. Lumuf and Alka slaughtered their way through the tunnels and eventually found themselves traveling deeper and deeper. The tunnels were trapped to hell and back again, and they got to a point where there was a mountain of dwarven corpses that formed an impassable wall. Of course, only if one didn't have magic. The two teleported past the mountain of corpses and continued on. The tunnels led further in and there were still more corpses here. Eventually, they led somewhere. An underground city. But first, a checkpost. Who goes there? Two dwarves, armed with axes, shouted. They sensed some movement in the loose pebbles or dirt of the tunnels, but not enough to detect them. Alka and Lumuf were cloaked and just walked past them. They stared. Strange. One of them walked to the puddle and muttered. Why'd the puddle move when there's no one? Home to about 50 or perhaps 60,000 dwarves carved into tunnels. Here, they had a large central well that extracted water from deep below. Then, there were magical crystals throughout large parts of the city that produced light, and also crystals that produced air. They were ruled by a king. A city guardian. The city guardian was an extremely old dwarf, and dwarves, as far as I remembered, generally lived to about 200 to 300 years. But Lumuf, through his senses, could roughly estimate the man to be close to 1,000 years old. There were many old records kept in this city. It was known as Stragmar, and interestingly, we soon discovered an object at the heart of the city similar to one we had seen before. The leyline focusing lens of the Margmarian dwarves, located beneath the city guardian's chambers, pulsed and still possessed strong magical energy. Ancient, but unlike our leyline focusing lens, this one still retained a great level of power. The blood of the fallen. He held in his hand a bowl of blood and poured the blood on the relic. The relic buzzed as the blood flowed around it, and we felt minute increases in the relic's power. The city survived, but did not prosper. The spiders would attack them if they were ever discovered, and though the dwarves frequently sent out scouting parties to explore the surface, these scouting parties were instructed to avoid leading the demonic spiders towards any new exits they made. Tunnels were being made all the time, each with traps and defenses. Dwarven stubbornness seemed to have possessed them, and these folks were not like the Ulurans. The Ulurans had given up on the surface world. The lords were content to be masters of their underground lairs, away from the demons of the surface. But the dwarves of Darkguard 3 did not. Lumuf and Alka soon discovered the presence of multiple such dwarven cities, about 20 scattered over the world. They'd been trapped for the past 10 to 20,000 years, but the surface remained a land that they always sought to reclaim. These city guardians told tales of their old legends, of when they were surface dwellers, and the dwarves had dedicated historians that chronicled their past and built massive records about what they'd achieved. A myth to inspire their people to keep going. It was perhaps this difference in where Snek's Ulurans and the dwarves differed in how they viewed their historical records. The dwarves, as we'd seen on many worlds, placed great value on their past, and that became their strength in hard times. The Ullurans were less beholden to it, and thus adapted to their new situation. The two returned to Treehome and prepared for our next steps. Also, this year we had 3 demon kings, 2 later than expected and 1 earlier than expected. The 2 later worlds were Sarlpi and the Great Steppes. The annihilation of the demon king went smoothly, and we also added the 2 new heroes, Sandra and Perry, to support the war effort. The 2 were very nervous to face the demon king on Sarlpi. The first demon king they faced had been so severely weakened that this second demon king would actually be their real challenge. They made a few mistakes here and there, but the heroes' innate sensibilities meant they were spared of the problems. Lumoof was also around, just in case the demon king wanted to try its usual end-of-life nuke. The domain holders then handled the demon kings on the Great Steppes and then, Landas. The demon king on Landas came earlier than expected, and the native elves panicked. The idea of another disaster like the previous demon king was still fresh in their minds. The defensive forces prepared for battle, but with the domain holders around, the war ended swiftly. Still, after the intense preparations the local militia made, a lot of this energy was unused. So, we organized a military expedition to demon worlds for the native militia to sort out their unspent energy. Have you thought of what you wanted? Eon asked Aben, and the knight looked uncertain. It had been years, and yet Aben continued to put off his choice. Do you imagine me to be a teacher, Eon? Aben countered. The knight was a diligent practitioner, frequently practiced combat even on his own and also was regularly seen around the various leyline dungeons of our worlds. His presence was often as a guide, a role that perhaps seems like that of a teacher. But how one perceived themselves was not the same as how the world and others perceived them. I imagine not. But it is for you to imagine for yourself, who you want to be. This choice is very much a personal one. It is not us who will live with those choices. It is you who will face them. And you imagine correctly. I've served as a knight for decades, and yet even all this time I've devoted it to the front lines. A teacher, a master to young students. I think it is not for me. Aben nodded. Which is why I do believe the castle knight to be a better choice for me. Then why hesitate? It was a silly question. In the end, it was always something else. Perhaps, I just want to see what happens when I do. Perhaps, after being denied my domain for so long, I thought I should relish it, and let the choice linger until I am finally over it. It was entirely his call, and he then proceeded to laugh. And laugh. It felt like he was laughing to release some kind of long-held frustration. I waited and toiled for decades. The system can wait a few years. Very well. In the end, Aben left it as it is. Was this his way of getting back at the system? Twinspace's new continent was already a quarter settled within a few years, mainly by the believers of the Temple of Eon. They had a tremendous advantage because Eonic priests and druids were skilled when it came to purification of the corrupted lands. Hoya's power was so strong that she could single-handedly clear a city-sized area of demonic blight with a single use of her holy powers. Expeditions landing grew massively in the past few years, as it became the main port of call for glory seekers, adventurers, and hunters. Many came to the new continent in hopes of finding treasure hidden underneath the muck of demonic corruption. This surge of migrants helped relieve the overcrowded stresses of the old continent, but it still remained a heavily overpopulated place. Food scarcity continued to be a problem, even if improvements were had. Expeditions landing also recruited farmers heavily in order to initiate large-scale food exports. The lands of the new continent were extremely fertile, and the excess food produced by the new continent would help alleviate the food stresses for the temple's believers. The priests began to preach about stewardship and how to properly manage the lands to prevent overexploitation. There was likely a time long ago when the old continent was just as fertile, but centuries of overfarming and extraction turned it into the husk it is today. The people of Twinspace, many of them came from modest origins back on the old continent, farmers, soldiers, and others of similar status. These came to the new continent to pursue wealth, but wealth is all around them. Farmers were unsure how to deal with the fertility of the land. The skills and methods used to enable farming on dry, almost barren land was very different from that of the fertile land. Hoya had to call on the expertise of druids and farmers from Treehome in order to help the settlers and pioneers on the new continent. It was a matter of excess. On these super fertile soil, they had to deal with other kinds of problems such as insects, limited use of certain types of fertilizers that often messed up the land's natural balance, and managing water. On the old barren lands, they could throw anything at the land and the land would soak up any excess. In other words, planting the way they used to often poisoned their crop, because the natural environment already could provide what the crops needed. Even inflation was an area where we had to think and manage carefully. Crystals and gems were found so easily that we noticed some of the natives treating them as if they were disposable, instead of using them carefully. We knew that these crystals were only abundant now, but in a matter of decades the easy sources of these gems would dry up and the scarcity would return. So rationing and proper management of these resources was key. When it came to managing such cyclical resources, we found that the dwarves and the tree folks generally had a better track record. It was quite strange that many tree folks were genetically inclined towards the changes in the seasons, so to them, storing the excess to use during shortages came naturally. Dwarves, who were also historically heavy miners, also understood that the nature of metals depleted after a while. For the other races, these sort of concepts needed to be taught and drilled over years. So, we had treefolk lords and leaders from the FTC deployed to Twinspace to help manage these new settlements and control the settlers' innate need to harvest and consume all they could. Hoya then created the first new continent resource preservation fund, and had my giant attendant trees function as a long-term tree asuri of these resources. A portion of these precious gems and metals were redirected to the treasury for future use. Bringing in external experts and leaders did create friction between the zealots and the order, so we needed the priests to heavily lubricate the interactions. A key point Hoya thus emphasized was that the local leaders needed to be trained to replace the order officials brought from afar. Without the transfer of knowledge and a commitment to ensure that the natives of Twinspace would eventually lead their own organization, it would cause dissatisfaction over the long term. It would also reek of colonialism, if the leaders of Twinspace were always someone from elsewhere. Hoya, thus, had a lot to do. Mainly, selecting, promoting, and training zealots that could take up leadership positions and deal with me directly. As it was, Hoya's place as the voice of God that brought about the settlements of the new continent meant she had the weight of accomplishments and success to justify her leadership. Any appointed leader, especially from other worlds, would not have that same history and pedigree. Though Hoya was now immortal and could sit in that role forever, we needed her skills and abilities elsewhere, and also, it was unlikely that Hoya herself would want to remain a leader of Twinspace forever. We needed to start preparing for leadership succession, even if the work of developing the new continent was only in its early stages. Emperor Aranuel, I see you've done well. Lumuf's appearance on Shasan was greeted with a meal. Aranuel looked happy to see him, and the two hugged briefly. Aranuel's Hawa Holy Empire now expanded to cover 10 cities and they had a strong, standing force. But the challenges of Shazan's seasonal shifts placed significant hurdles for expansion. Even moving forces from one place to another required a lot of work. Olivia was there too, and she looked as pristine as she always had. She seemed a bit stronger, a few more levels gained. Greetings to you too, High Priestess. Since you're here, Lumuf, I want to negotiate for a larger shipment of people and goods from our world. Aranuel said. As it was, Aranuel's goods movement between the two worlds was fairly limited. There were 2 steps to move goods or people. From Treehome to the nearest node world and from the node world, a void portal to Shasan. Any particular reason? My expansion requires more military equipment. I ask that you carry these messages back to my Regent's Council and have them begin production. The Regent's Council have messages of their own. Lumuf handed the Emperor a letter. They expressed their frustrations with the Emperor's absence and the recent splinter factions that denounced the Emperor's actions as heretical. They want you back. The hell with them. Aranuel cursed. They can appoint a new emperor if they so wish. Only after you've dealt with the splinter states. Lumuf smiled. Those useless nobles. The emperor covered his forehead with his palm. Can't they keep a country together? Not so easy without your abilities, Emperor. He sat and thought about it for a moment, and wondered. Can I send Olivia? Olivia's borrowed divinity should be the perfect response to these foolish heretics. Olivia blinked. That is not what I agreed to. Aranuel added. Don't you want to visit Rune's homeworld? It's Eons base, and where you can feel what it's like being next to another divinity at full strength. Being near to Lumuf is sufficient. Olivia countered, and she was right. Lumuf's avatar mode recreated the same sensation. I argue that being in that burning valley is an experience in itself. Aranuel countered. I don't want to leave. My people here need me, and I honestly have more things to do here. There are problems I have to solve. Aranuel recruited heavily and borrowed heavily from our playbook. He instituted civil and social reforms and used his emperor abilities to create benefits for his people that the other city-states of Shasan didn't have. Shasan, a world with fragmented city-states separated by deserts, had never seen an empire. There was also no real way of controlling the fragmented city-states without a special set of powers. Eranuel, thus, as an emperor, created the first series of portal gates to connect the various cities. It was a heavy expense, only made possible with a set of resources provided by Olivia and the Hawa's core worlds, but necessary for them to function as a cohesive empire. Tell them no. I'm not going back. Olivia, go on my behalf. Eranuel said. No, he commanded, and Lumuf felt the emperor use some kind of holy power on the high priestess. The high priestess squirmed as she raised her own powers to resist. But in the end she buckled. A holy emperor was something else, and she sighed. Fine. I will have some unpleasant words about you when I return. I look forward to them. Eranuel laughed. 329. Graft robbery. 329. Year 301. Darkguard. Alka inspected 10,000 dwarven warriors and hundreds of the dwarven war machines, all in various states of readiness. 6 rift gates were set up, each able to send 1 war machine through every minute. Alka wanted more, but the void mages didn't have enough rift gates or void mana to sustain such a large movement of forces. Not without Stella or any of the void archmages. Alas, void archmages were so rare that they had far greater things to do. Are your people ready, Dissonian? Alka asked and the man nodded. Dissonian, a level 74 dwarven battlecrafter, used to be a military commander of the Delveguardian Yards. He had seen 3 large-scale battles against other dwarven cities, enemies of the Delveguardian Yards, and killed no less than 1,000 dwarves with his war machine. There were many craftsmen at work, the war machines modified for operations on other worlds. Breathing chambers, helmets and suits were installed on the war machines, while the dwarves themselves put on new suits. The craftsmen, both native to Delvegard and those from the other worlds, had adapted quickly to the suits used to function on other worlds. It was better to be prepared for whatever that was on the other side. Good. Come with me. These forces would head for Darkguard 3, and their goal was to free the surface of Darkguard 3 from the control of the demons. There was an unspoken understanding. They were ready, but they were all waiting. The invasion only began when the domain holders were here. Darkguard 3, just like any of the other demon worlds, possessed a demon mother. A former demon king that corrupted the planet's core and turned it into a demon king hatchery. Without destroying the demon mother, any invasion of Darkguard 3 would fail. Prior to the invasion, Alka made contact with the natives. They were surprised, but the presence of dwarves that they didn't recognize was all the proof they needed. It was a good choice to bring dwarves, because they were not greeted with skepticism, but instead treated like a kindred spirit. As if it was a miracle to see new faces. But the city guardian was rightfully skeptical of our ability to destroy the demons. An entirely fair consideration for an entity without any track record so far. But there were also things we didn't know. The burning sun is our punishment for the failure to protect our world from the demons. City Guardian Ramar said, once Alka and the Order managed to sneak in and arrange a meeting. The burning lands were once normal, back when the world used to turn. The presence of the demon mother changed how the world functioned. Then again, having seen how Tropicsworld was restored and even now how Deadworld was going through some environmental changes, it made sense. But Darkguard used to be a single world. Could it be that one of those suns was the original one, and now what they had was split apart to 3? More importantly, this raised the big question. What exactly is the limit of the demons' powers? Hawa could add planets to his core worlds, so that they could accommodate more believers. If the demons had almost godlike abilities, then we needed to approach the demon's sun with the same tactic as how the demons defeated the dead god Zafar. We needed to remove the demon's ability to collect power. So, what exactly gave the demons power? Maybe, on a larger scale, the demons are like the Demon King on Gigantodragon. The demons gain power for each and every core controlled by them. Directly linked. Alka theorized, and it was a theory I understood. If so, we had to free up multiple worlds, weaken the demons, and then only we could take on the demon sun. We would need to attack a whole lot of worlds for this to work. There were mages and researchers focused on the study of demons. What gave demon kings their power? They possessed a demonic core, but was that really the source of their power? The droplet from the black sun. Thus, I set out to try something different for the next demon king. Let's try to use our powers on the demon king. I told Lumuf, and Lumuf expected it. He shared my thoughts. After all, I wanted to test out whether it was possible to turn a demon king into something else, through natural mana overwhelming. But first, We needed a test subject, and the demon mother at the heart of the Darkguard 3 would be our first guinea pig. Spiders. The demonic spiders massed everywhere, but throwing more flesh at the problem wasn't going to solve things. The war machines. Giant magical beams burnt through the spiders, and their gigantic legs easily crushed them. Heap formation. The Delveguardian dwarven leader screamed. March. The war machines took a single step together. The demon spiders might not last long against the gigantic war machines, but thousands of them could easily overwhelm even the strongest war machines. Beneath them, there were smaller machines, where the dwarven warriors operated something that resembled mechanical armor. The spiders that made it past the array of magical beams from the hundreds of war machines had to get past 3 lines of dwarven warriors, armed with gigantic axes and heavy blades. The spiders were slaughtered. The dwarves got better at fighting the demons. It had been a month since the attack on Darkguard 3 began. The Order managed to destroy hundreds of demonic spawning pools. The native dwarves were surprised, but the presence of almost 10,000 dwarven warriors was reassuring. The domain holders walked past the swarm of demons unharmed, Lumuf's presence hidden. Rune and Johann came along to support the dwarves, just in case something happened. But our destination was a familiar place. A tunnel that led to the depths. Lumuf would go alone. Well, he would never be alone, but the rest of them would remain on the surface. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, and we could feel the presence of the demon mother lingering near the core of the dwarven world. Our thoughts were troubled. How did the demons do it? What exactly was the upper limit of their strength? The demon mother lurked within the husk of a planetary core. No. This core felt like a fragment, a shadow of what it once was. It has strands that lead elsewhere. Lumuf could see magical, spiritual lines emanating throughout the core, and it seemed to vanish as it reached out as if those strands went somewhere else. The 3 worlds were still linked, even if they were separated. But how, and why? Why did the demons do such a thing? Or was it just an experimental thing it did once or twice? But it was also easy for us to spot the demon mother. Its presence was like a dark shadow over the entire core. After falling for hours from the surface, Lumuf's roots fanned out like legs and hooks and helped slow his fall. The demon mother was already wary, because we sensed it shrinking and preparing for battle. A blast of energy came our way, but only slammed into our wooden shields. Block the entrance, Lumuf said, as he activated Eon's spirit. My spiritual form manifested where the tunnel to the surface met the world's core chamber, and my roots fanned out to cover the entire inner wall of the core chamber. The demon mother was trapped, unless it was prepared to blast its way out of the core in another direction. But here, at this distance, the core that was the womb of so many demon kings was now a prison and my roots counterattacked. The demon mother attempted to hide within the core, but it soon realized how foolish that was. Its attacks were harmless. The demon mother was relatively weak. Compared to the demon kings it spawned. Lumuf approached the demon mother. It was still a large, monstrous thing. Even shrunk to its smallest size, it was still bigger than our beetles. It was much taller than Lumuf, but it was a shell of whatever it once was. All demon mothers were once demon kings. I wanted to study them. Figure out the mechanics of what made them do things. Lumuf's steps in the hollowed core of Darkguard 3 felt ominous, the demon mother attacking with all it had. But none of the attacks got past Lumuf's defenses. For a moment, Lumuf, surrounded by hundreds of glowing green spiritual roots, looked more like a demon than the demon mother's black, slime-like form. It had nowhere to go and we struck back. Our roots reached out, and via Lumuf's avatar form, these roots easily grabbed hold of the demon mother. It struggled, as it flung its limbs around as if they were powerful whips. But my roots were much stronger, and the demon mother's limbs only served as anchors for my roots to latch on. The creature attempted to screech. It wanted to release some kind of warning. But our roots moved quickly, and reached deep into its slimy flesh and touched its core. And the flood of mana that followed drowned out whatever struggles it had. We flooded the creature with our mana. A lot of our mana. Throughout the entirety of the worlds we were connected to, it felt as if there were a slight dip in the magic available everywhere. I sucked it from all the other worlds and flooded the demon mother. The creature whimpered, as the dark, hollowed core of the demon mother started to change color. It still struggled, but with each struggle, the once dark demon mother transformed more into something that was both animal and plant at the same time. It was multicolored, and the varied color mana visibly spread throughout the demon mother. I could feel its demonic energies attempt to resist. But there wasn't much left in it to fight us. It screeched in horror, but those were the creature's final gasps. The mana spread. I felt it pour through into the strange, parched soul of the demon. It wasn't a complete soul, but more like a stitched-together alternative. Quite like the artificial souls, but with a demon origin. All the demonic creatures had some variant of this template. An incomplete soul, fueled by the dry fires of the demon's mana. Like a flood, our powers were like a tsunami, and that powerful fire was extinguished. Natural mana overwhelming upgraded. Efficiency improved. Anti-demonic qualities upgraded. You've successfully converted the Demon King's husk. And at that moment, I saw the memories written into the Demon King's husks. The creature that now stood in its place was a multicolored slime, but instead of liquid, it was a mass of flesh of all sorts that could reshape itself at will. An eonic stem mass. An existence that was pretty much the primordial form of all flesh and could reshape itself to take any other. It first began with a birth. A presence deep within a pulsing planet. It knew it was in the heart of a planet's core, and it felt its own power grow. The energies of worlds drained to feed the growing creature. This was its life before it was a demon mother. Power. Growing power. Death. Destruction. Consume. Expand. Conquer. I felt the creature's command. To destroy. To expand. To create more of itself. It was not a creature of evil. It had no emotions, but it was commanded to do what it always did. To consume. Yet it understood its targets to some degree, and I saw flickers of understanding. Of using emotions. Tactics. To turn the natives against one another through corrupting the natives into demonic hosts. I tried to understand the visions it shared with me. They were all imprinted with an intense desire to consume, and they sought out sources of great magic. They could calculate odds and weigh tactics. Imprinted in each and every demon king was an array of tactics and strategies. This demon mother then shared how it slaughtered the heroes that came to fight it, because the demon mother used the natives as blackmail material. These natives had zero value to the demons, but the heroes had a given value. The demon mother embedded these living natives into its flesh and kept them dangling around it like a human shield. In their moments of hesitation, the demon mother attacked, and the demons won. To them, these manipulative actions were just victory tactics. The demons did not view us more than tools. Food. A plague. A virus. I saw visions of how the demon king then dug into the ground with magic, utilizing the realm's inherent ley lines to open up a path to the core. Once there, its form was then separated. Its own power, that of the demon king, was separated into multiple seedlings, between 15 to 30 depending on the power of the core. Those seedlings then formed the start of the new demon king. What remained of the demon mother then functioned as a controller of the demon's core, and it created a link to the heart of the demon's son. The prison. It didn't show me what was inside, but I knew then that it contained messages. Images. Visions. Enemies. Locations and targets. The demons communicated in some way or form, and it was carried through pulses of magic. Similar to what the demon mother tried to emit before I've converted it into the stem mass. The demons had emitter stations. Places where the messages from the demon son were amplified and then spread to more places. That was a weakness we could capitalize on, and better still, now we knew where it was. Could we hack the emitter stations, convert them into something we controlled, and use it to mess with the demon's communication methods? Darkguard III's core hummed, a few moments of the disappearance of the demon mother's presence. It was like an old machine that wasn't used for a long time, suddenly restarted. Its hum was shaky, uncertain. It coughed, like an old rackety engine trying to catch its breath. I fed it energy and already, I felt Darkguard III's core slowly rouse from its hazy slumber, even if it constantly coughed. It had residual demonic energies to purge. Well, what can we do with this creature? Lumuf stood and approached the now docile stem mass. You may assign a titan frame to the stem mass. Stem mass gains the ability to impersonate a demon king, and temporarily emit demon king-like presence. However, it would not possess the full strength of a demon king, only a fraction. The stem mass can also reshape itself into any known creature and grow flesh of any kind. You may also transform stem mass into a living colony, and it can also help spread your influence. Adding additional titan frames may unlock additional abilities. I don't know. I answered. My goal was to convert a demon mother. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do with the end result. But the presence of a living colony could be useful. But the information shared by the demon mother did give me a rough gauge of how strong the demon kings were. I needed a few more worlds. But converting a demon king was not out of reach. 330. Alka and Darkguard. Lord Alka. This way. Dissonian, one of the 30 or so Delveguardian leaders, led him deeper into the city. The city guardian of the oldest known city of Darkguard III, Grand Mine, was present at the large meeting room. It was lit with glowing orange gems, though for the dwarves, it was more of a convenience. Dark Guardians were used to their eyes seeing in the dark, and quite a few Dark Guardians had developed some kind of seismic sense or vibration sense, so they could maneuver about freely. The city guardian stood to receive him. Lord Alka, the thing you requested for. There were 3 chests that looked like they were truly ancient things. But what was inside were not artifacts. Instead, they were the records of the earliest histories of Darkguard 3 and from a time when they were known as Grandura. The chests were magically protected, and Alka looked around. Are they magical? The city guardian of the Grand Mine shook his head. No. Precautions. He withdrew his magical energies as far as he could. For an alchemist and explosion expert, it was something he did all the time. One could never be quite sure when one's own magical powers could interfere with whatever concoction they produced, especially someone with a domain. The chest revealed hundreds of old books. Dissonian, call the historical scribes and mages in. We've got work to do. Dissonian nodded as the Order's official historical experts and researchers got to work. They were elves, treefolk, humans and dwarves. The city guardian still wasn't used to seeing the other races, so he still stepped back. Alka assured him anyway. Do not worry, city guardian. They are my people, and they will handle these documents with utmost care. An elven mage and archivist immediately checked it for any inherent magical protections. Once the mage was sure she didn't detect any, she placed a pile of blank papers, wooden planks, ink, and a random assortment of materials, and then she activated a series of spells. Preservation, book duplication, and book transcription. The ancient books glowed and truly like magic, the pile of papers, wooden planks, and materials started to reshape itself. It began to replicate the old books, one part at a time. What's in them? A few of the city guardian's elders were there, and one of them could not help but ask the city guardian. Even the elders didn't know of the existence of such records. Old books, elder, historical records from our world's ancient past. From a time when we were very different. Alka nodded. Some days, I find dwarven habits of recording every transaction down extremely painful to work with. But when it comes down to it, dwarves are amazing at preserving ancient history and knowledge. What better way to remember a grudge than to have it minuted down in detail? The city guardian smiled. I honestly never read them. I thought it was too fragile of a thing to ever touch, and as far as I know, most of my predecessors thought so too. The mages would need a few weeks to fully create an almost exact replica of these historical records. This will take a while. Alka pointed at the archivists at work. Come, city guardian, we have other things to discuss. What do you think of the blessings? Alka posed the question to the Dwarven Council. They were seated at a rare round table. Dwarves, as far as Alka knew, did not like round tables all that much. They were creatures with a fairly strong emphasis on hierarchy, something common across all the worlds. But today, they gathered around in a rarely used meeting room. Multiple city guardians across Darkguard 3 all came to talk. The realm wants us to grow and replenish our strength, that is what we understand at a simple level. But is there all to it? I hear from my people that your men have been talking about some great war. That this is a war to free the captured dwarven worlds. Some things just happened organically. The Great War was supposed to be a war against the demons, but the minds of people invented their own stories. The dwarves had taken a more specific stance towards the Great War. A war to liberate the captured dwarven worlds and restore their place in the multiverse. It was not ideal, since there was a chance that dwarves would not participate in the larger war, and Alka knew that dwarves were fairly insular people who did not like mingling with other races. In other words, there was a risk that dwarves as a whole might not want to help the other races. In the end, Alka focused on what mattered. Outcomes. A coalition formed from multiple worlds, of different races, of different backgrounds was bound to have disagreements, but just because things were not perfect, didn't and shouldn't stop something good from happening. Compromises were always made, and as much as some of the Earth origin folks hated to admit it. Divide and conquer, or in Eons' case, divide and manage, was horrifically effective. Alka sat in the hall as multiple others talked, and then, the door opened. A few of the Delveguardians walked in. Among them were the block master from the Delveguardian yards of Ruthfjord. There were seats around the round table still empty. The room was fit for 100 dwarves, and the room itself was so ancient that there was a time when every nation only sent one person to sit around this table. It was perhaps a miracle that there were still 20 left to occupy what was left. Our focus should be on our blessings. These blessings want us to repopulate our destroyed worlds. Expansion shouldn't be the goal. A dwarven city guardian stated. The man likely never left his city and its surrounding regions in his entire life, so this trip was his furthest. In our glory days, we had cities that covered so much of the surface. Alka inwardly sighed. He heard this argument so many times. Dwarven insularity. Dwarven selfishness. Dwarves and their cities built into the mountains so they could hide away. Dwarves could be extremely generous in some ways, but their affections were reserved only with friends and other dwarves. All these other worlds were people they didn't know. There was no reason to care. The dwarves shouted. It was their normal way of diplomacy. Alka nodded. As the Order's representatives to the Dark Guards, I must repeat that we do not impose this duty on the cities. But, we will ask for volunteers, we will recruit from the talented. The Great War against the demons is our chance to take the fight back to the creatures that reduced your worlds to a fragment of what it was. For the Delve Guardians, diplomacy was a show of strength. The strong imposed, and the weak followed. But once they were freed of the shackles of their world, there were other ways. Alka went on the usual pitch. It was a well-practiced one, honed by priests and matriarchs. About the Great War, about how the fires burned even the dwarves. About thinking long-term. To win over dwarves, it needed to be seen as profitable in the long term and also appeal to the underlying dwarven need for superiority. I have spoken to some of your warriors. A city guardian countered. But I wonder, what is in it for those who join this battle? Alka didn't have to answer, because another city guardian answered on his behalf. Levels. Have you been hiding within your city for so long that you've forgotten this is a great opportunity for our people to gain levels? We become stronger, and we learn how to make better weapons and tools. These are dwarves from another world. And our way of life. That first city guardian asked, but the way they talked was rough. Brutish. I understand the need for levels, but our finest warriors will be sent to Hellworlds, and what is left of our home. Our home is no longer in danger. The second city guardian countered. That sort of thinking is why so many once glorious dwarven cities fell into ruin. Who knows if the demons return tomorrow? If they want our warriors, I permit them to only take our youngest and freshest. Our experienced warriors must stay with us. Alka smiled. That played right into how the Order liked things. The Order was very much an institution that favored internal promotion. Young warriors he could train were perfectly what he wanted. With the blessings of Darkguard, there would be many such young blood over the next few decades to feed the Order's insatiable need for warriors. As the Order's representative, I am agreeable to only recruit those below level 40. But as always, we ask for full access to the dwarven cities so that we can reach the weak and the young. The entire room was silent, as their minds tried to wrap their heads around it. These cities were so used to competition for the best that Alka's deal stumped them. They were not stupid. Wait. The first city guardian realized a little too late that they had played right into Alka's preference. You want our young. Yes. Talents that we can train and fit into our existing order is exactly what we want. The planet was rotating once more, though it was still slower than it once was. Darkguard 3 took 5 times as much time as it once did before the demons. The sun also no longer burned with the hostility it once did. Instead, with each passing day, it was as if the sun grew milder. Softer. The presence of dwarven druids from Treehome helped the surface regrow the trees that had once lived. Many of their seeds were dormant, dried out, and desiccated deep in the hot, dried rock. Water also began to flow once more. The stopped planet caused water to freeze on the dark side of the world, while on the light side, the harsh sun evaporated all remaining water and turned them into clouds. What do you think? Alka smiled as he watched a group of dwarves leave their old cities and out into the surface. The surface was so alien. So many of them had not seen the surface, and even then, the harsh, still healing surface was a real sight. Amazing. It could be much better. Alka said. You have old paintings that depict these old sceneries. In a few years, the land will heal and those scenes can be seen once more. The sun is so bright. The dwarves blinked heavily. Some were not used to the sun that they turned away. A few used ancient parasols. They would need to start making more of those soon. For the Delveguardian warriors, this was their reward. A few cried quietly, and tried to hide it by drinking some strong rum. The former block master watched. Do you see this when you help the other worlds? I'm not usually here to witness it. Alka nodded. I have many places to be, though now we are merely waiting for time. The block master understood. This sort of joy and satisfaction was something that would stick within the warriors' souls. A reason for why they would fight when needed. A reason to push harder even when the demons throw everything at them. A pity that so many of these folks that share our blood do not see it. Our experiences form the basis for our actions, even if some of them are random. Alka smiled, as the mages sent him a message. The archives are ready. So, what do we find? Alka rushed to the room where his little army of archivists and historians were busy. There were hundreds of notes and walls filled with diagrams and charts. They'd been really busy. The three worlds used to share a single star. Darkguard I was the outermost world, and Darkguard 2 was the middle world. Whatever the cores shared, it's true. I expected that. What else? Alka prompted the researcher to continue. They used to worship Eras and a god called Sulya. Eras is the god of knowledge and creation, while Sulya is the god of earth and the flesh. Some of these books speak of a tale where the death of Sulya caused a great madness to spread amongst Sulya's earthly creations and that turned them into demons. How reliable is this thing? Alka picked up the replica book and reread the 10 or so pages over and over. This is a book on the creation myths of Darkguard. We don't know. It doesn't seem like there was divine touch on it, so we cannot be sure. No, what's important is these three. The researchers flipped to a part where it spoke of an ancient great machine. A creation of the god Eras, forged from the floating metallic rocks of the great star sea. A sun ring. Eras created the sun ring. We are not sure if this is the same sun ring, since the descriptions are vague and the design seems rudimentary. But it seemed to suggest that the sun rings are layered, with people living within them. The domain holder frowned. We didn't detect anything, but it is possible that the materials used to create such a powerful object also prevented us from finding them. Maybe we should explore the sun ring. The archivist countered. At least, before we break it. Ha, true. Alka nodded. In the first attempt, Eon was attacked by two demon kings. This time, they could most likely take on two demon kings and win. Exploration of the sun ring should be possible. These descriptions say there are hidden chambers within the sun ring. It matches up to Eon's experience. Eon could only place a clone where there was soil underneath, and yet, that was only in certain parts of the sun ring. There must be other pockets with other things inside. Alka walked and paced the room. It was true that the domain holders did not explore the entirety of the sun rings. It was such a massive object that it would take a really long time to reach all the parts. So, it was entirely possible that there were other hidden chambers. In other words, there may be relics left behind from eras or the gods that created such things. But the demons were able to repair the barrier even when we cracked it. Repair is not the same as creation. The archivist theorized. True. It looks like I have to convince my fellow friends to go for a sun ring-sized dungeon exploration. A dungeon dive. 330b. Invasive species. Year 301 Part 2. A dive into the sun rings. Lumuf paused as Alka explained his theory. The discoveries on the world of Darkguard 3 and the ancient, preserved records of the dwarves suggested the possibility of some old ruins hidden deep within the sun rings, from an era when sun rings were a recent creation of Eras. If they were really a creation of Eras, of course. Is there a possibility that they are actually talking about the three-ringed world, rather than the sun ring? Lumuf questioned. After all, the descriptions recorded within those old tomes appeared to be tales of eras as told by the high priests and avatars of that ancient era. But I soon remembered that the three-ringed world, sadly, lacked any old records of its older times, and our brief contact with the will of the three-ringed world did not suggest it had links to the god of craft. It was thus unlikely. It feels like a trap, though. If we are within the sun rings and not on the surface, there's just something more dangerous about such enclosed spaces. Lumuf frowned, perhaps, inheriting a bit of disdain for closed spaces. If there's any trap that's 10,000 years old still functioning, I kinda gotta give it credit. Alka countered. Fair enough. Who'd you want? At least you and Edna. And Rune. Very well. We'll do that after we deal with a demon king. Fine. Alka shrugged. He knew he wasn't going to be able to get Lumuf to move until after the Mountainworld's demon king. Our recent capture of the demon mother and experiments on the stem mass also brought us a wee bit closer towards actually attempting a capture of a demon king. Year 302. We needed to have the mana from a few more worlds. I now had 4 clone trees unused, and these clone trees would function best on worlds where I intended to maintain a strong presence. Conveniently, there was also a test case coming up. Mountainworld was finally under attack from the Demon King. Again. It certainly felt like I had just dealt with a Demon King from Mountainworld. Has it been 15 years already? Let's plant a clone tree on Landis. Lumuf suggested. It's a large world, and the elves are heavily in our favor. This means this is an easy world to expand. Or, have the clone tree in the world of twin space. I would like that. Hoya agreed. The zealots deserve to witness the greatness of our god, and the weight of a clone would be immense. Strategically, the conditions of the new continent, the prosperity and the general dominance of the Temple of Eons zealots also meant that it would be a friendly place. I would be able to significantly expand and further influence the zealots with my abilities directly. So, I shortlisted Twinspace for a clone. But where else? In terms of raw magical power, Gigantodragon was also quite high up. The unusually strong nature ley line power meant I could probably access the equivalent of 1.5 worlds with it. But I couldn't just cut it without some margin. From what I'd seen in the Demon Mother's recorded memories, the Demon Kings had multiple countermeasures if they found themselves in an unfavorable situation. They would likely attempt self-destruction or send a warning to request for reinforcements. The Demon Mother's memories also did not have any frame of reference of the strength of the other Demon Kings, only its own. After Patrick ran some models, it was likely we needed an additional 5 to 7 new worlds to be able to confidently take on an attempt to overpower most Demon Kings through pure magical energy alone. Even if we based it on our existing model, we probably could take on certain weaker Demon Kings now. Since Mountain World would soon face a Demon King, I thought it was appropriate that we gave it a shot. Darkguard 2. Parasites. Lumuf picked up a group of them and chucked them into multiple biolabs for studies. These dwarven-looking demonic husks were examined repeatedly. Alka hoped that there was some semblance of intelligence in them. But none. The only thing dwarven about them was how they looked like dwarves. But other than that, these husks were thoroughly demonic, and so, the decision was an easy one. We would have to purge the world of these parasites. With that determined, Alka returned to Darkguard I and Darkguard 3 to prepare the dwarves on both worlds for the coming invasion of their sister planet. The liberation of Darkguard 3 brought about massive changes to that once demon-controlled world. The once unmoving world, a part of it constantly burning from the heat of their sun, started to move. The planetary core of Darkguard 3 was like an engine that was long asleep. Even so, its stored energy was heavily consumed by the demons, and so it was much, much weaker than it once was. Just like Tropics World, it would take decades for it to regain its old strength. But first, the Demon Mother. The Demon Mother of Darkguard 2 was fairly easy to find, and just like with Darkguard 3, I wanted to do the same thing. I wanted to know how many stem masses I could control at any point, and in a rather fun twist of irony, each stem mass made it easier for me to conquer more stem mass. In a snowball fashion, I explored what ways to use the stem mass and realized there were 2 good ways of using them. 1. As mana-producing stores. Using the Titan frames, it was possible to reshape these stem masses into mana-generating existences. This was due to their history as demon kings that stored and produced tremendous levels of mana. Most of that ability was lost when they transformed into their mother forms, but what remained was still pretty damned good. The second way was to use them to offset the demonic corruption. In mathematical terms, these demon mothers were designed to corrupt things, but the very abilities they used to corrupt things could be reversed through my power, and so, it was actually possible to use stem masses to assist in the capture of demon mothers, even if they were not strong enough to do so individually. This ability would most likely help when we attempted to overwhelm a demon king and convert it into one of us. Do you think you can do a few this month? Edna quipped over our shared senses as Lumuf dived into the pits of Darkguard 2, accompanied only by the new form of the Ionic stem mass. Counterdemon mass was a giant green mass filled with green vines attached to Lumuf. I hope so. Lumuf said. If we could free multiple demon worlds from the hold of demons, even if we couldn't be there to rehabilitate them, it would still stop the decline. The demon mother at the heart of Darkguard 2 was fairly similar to its sister on Darkguard 3, with an exception. It actually attempted to corrupt Lumuf, only to be burned by that spiritual connection. After that single contact, it seemed to realize it had no chance and started to flee. It was no use. Lumuf caught up to it and through our natural mana overwhelming, our energies spread quickly. The counterdemon mass helped to guide the mana such that it was able to perfectly offset the demon's defenses, and it produced some mana of its own that helped speed up the process. It was a brief moment, because our mana now moved swiftly and precisely through its entire body, and so, the demon mother was now a second stem mass. You'll run out of Titan frames. 3 to 4 could be equal to a single world's passive mana generation. As with the first stem mass, we saw a dream. The dream was similar, and again, the data points from the second demon mother pointed to the same signal emitter worlds. Then, Once that was removed, Lumuf attached himself to the hollowed planetary core of Darkguard 2 and began to purge it of demonic mana. This process took 3 weeks, as Lumuf himself sat at the heart of the core. On the surface, the demonic parasites were still untouched. These creatures had no way of traveling to the core. The 3 worlds were freed. It happened just as suddenly, as the 3 worlds' cores and suns emitted a strange presence. All 3 worlds seemed to reach through the void sea and touched each other. It was at that moment that I saw another dream. A voice. There were 3 voices. It was one voice. We were once whole, and forced apart. Thanks to you, we are now whole once more. The newly united will of Darkguard flooded me with memories of a truly ancient time. Perhaps a few 100,000 years ago. Eras. Our world's creator and patron of the dwarves, the machines, the hermits, and the serpents of the deep. The dwarves will walk on these 3 worlds once more, a blessing from us, from the will of the world to the children who persevered. We were once a collection of worlds called Eurasia, but in honor of our saviors, we shall rename ourselves as Darkguard. It was at that moment that the entire dwarven population received a great blessing on all the dwarves of the 3 worlds. One even Alka received Darkguard's blessing. Enhanced lifespan. Greatly enhanced fertility. Greatly enhanced health and growth rate. Experience gain increased. Blessings of Darkguard will expire in 100 years. May our dwarven children return to greatness once more. Darkguard must have been incredibly powerful in its prime, which was why it could be separated into 3 worlds. The fact that it could even create a powerful blessing was something we'd not encountered before. The changes to the 3 Darkguard worlds were impressive, as even Darkguard 2 demonic parasites were soon under attack from newly spawned monsters. The blessings were enjoyed by anyone who had lived in these 3 worlds. With renewed energy and the blessings of the land itself, even our warriors felt stronger and healthier. So, Darkguard 2 was soon purged of its demonic parasites. On Twinspace, Hoya found a location at the heart of the new continent. A place of incredibly strong magical ley lines and great mineral richness. A place to locate the new clone. Hoya decided to pay homage to New Freaka and decided to name the city that would soon be the great pilgrimage site of all the zealots of Twinspace after the world itself. To reflect the union of old and the new tree. I had extensive leeway to shape how I appear, as long as it was a tree. I could be a tree in the shape of a dragon, though, it would still be a tree. For Twinspace, she wanted to name the city Twintrees, and so, asked that if a clone appeared, it should be as if 2 trees were entangled together like a knot and that the trees should have slightly different colors. It wasn't a problem, and so, Twintrees was founded at the heart of the new continent. As my new clone spread its roots into the soil of Twinspace, I felt a new connection snap into my mind. A link to its will of the world, and as with the others, a dream. An image of prosperity. Of 2 prosperous regions. Of the demons manipulating the ley lines so that the prosperity of 2 continents was now redirected to only one. Mountain World. The Demon King arrived, and my domain holders were ready. At first, the Demon King was scheduled to arrive at a particular location above a city, but thanks to improved knowledge and recent research by my void mages, as a result of our recent STEM mass, and past studies on how their rift gates worked, my void mages tried to meddle with its coordinates. It took Stella and an entire army of void mages, and we were not able to shift it very far, but the very fact that we were able to cause its arrival location to move just slightly outside of a city's location was a huge success. At least, we had alternatives to moving an entire city. The success gave Stella a few levels, and now she was next, closer to the level 200. Not only that, one of her void archmages, Veter, was now in the high level 140s and hopefully should make it to a domain soon. No matter what it was, after the successes with the demon mothers, it was time we took it to the next level. I've got to sit this one out. Lausanne and the heroes were in an entirely different world altogether. There was a magical projection for them to watch the war. It was still an extremely expensive endeavor at this point, with magical resources to maintain such long-range projection still heavily dependent on my network of clone trees and artificial minds. But one day, this magical world would see something akin to television. That makes you one of us. Colette laughed, the liberated hero, looking absolutely relaxed as Lausanne took her seat in the viewing gallery. The rest of the heroes sat, most of them looked somewhat stressed. A heavy helping of tea was served. It would calm their nerves. A lot of them wanted to be there for the fight. The voice in their hearts called them to do so. The hero class compelled them to fight. But for now, it was suppressed. Kay sat next to the domain holder. So, Eons going to try to take over a demon king. It's been attempted to some degree. Lausanne nodded. But let's see what happens. Alright. No star mana. Lumoof repeated, the rift wobbling as Stella and the Void Mage's manipulation kicked in. Everyone checked their gear. Yup. Edna smiled. It was the third time he had asked. The Demon King was a corrupted dragon of some sort. The creature's wings were a mixture of rotten flesh and burning magma, while the body was a scaly lattice of charred stone and magma. The domain holders stood and faced the Demon King. A shockwave swept through the region as it arrived. Yet, perhaps due to our sensitivity and familiarity with Demon Kings, it seemed confused. This was not where it was supposed to land. Alright, let's soften this thing up and see whether we can turn it into one of our own. Edna declared and charged first. Her spears glowed with power, as her martial paragon's abilities kicked in. Her spears slammed into the gigantic demon dragon and made it stagger a few steps backward, each spear creating a small crater of its own. I had mana stored up in multiple worlds and added additional mana storage potatoes and gems just for this battle. Many of these potatoes would not last beyond the month. The amount of concentrated magic stored in them made them unstable. 10 domain holders, excluding Lausanne, struck the Demon King, and it weakened with each attack. Lumoof's avatar form created gigantic roots that trapped the Demon King and ensured it was weakened. The battle dragged on a little, mainly because we wanted to shave off the creature's spiritual energy. All while I kept tabs on its relative strength. Now that we'd encountered so many Demon Kings, I could largely estimate their strength based on the density of their spiritual presence. The Demon King's soul, if it could be called one, was more like an artificial soul than an actual soul. It lacked the sort of will and independence that made a soul its own person. In a way, a Demon King was a supersized self-replicating nanobot. Grey goo, in demon form. Any spiritual imprint or form it took, was something produced by the Demon Mother in combination with the core of the planet. But once the Demon King's power was below the halfway mark, I gave the sign and the process began. It started by keeping the creature in check. Edna activated a series of 10 massive glass spears and slammed into parts of the Demon King. It kept the Demon King locked in place. Lumoof went next, as he activated my spiritual shadow. Eons spirit. My massive tree appeared right next to the Demon King and my roots pierced the beast easily. I found the demon core in an instant and started the process. I flooded the creature with my mana. The sheer amount of mana flooding through my body and into the Demon King made the weakened Demon King whimper and struggle in surprise as my natural mana began to override its inbuilt demonic commands. The stem masses appeared right next to me and they helped. The Demon King struggled some more, as the entirety of the Demon King's flesh melted away. Or tried to. The domain holders each immediately grabbed hold of the Demon King and prevented it from shrinking. My mana continued to flood the core and its immediate vicinity, and I saw the core start to change color. A sheen of green started to emerge. I couldn't do this with the defeated Demon King cores. Once the Demon King was defeated, the cores turned into objects, instead of the vessel of the artificial soul. The green on its soul started to grow. Through my mana and my roots, I gazed into its artificial-ish soul. My mana flowed into the dried lands and began to turn it into something else. Greenery began to spread, as fields of grass started to replace the Demon King's dried, barren wastelands. Just a bit more. The demon wriggled in shock, and then, a secondary defensive mechanism activated. I attempted to interrupt it, but unfortunately it was a step faster. It refused to let itself submit to my power in time. With nothing more than just a whimper, the Demon King's core shattered in half. It was quite anticlimactic. I cursed. We were so close. The rest of the flesh fell onto the ground as if they were a ragdoll. The Demon King was defeated, a celebration everywhere. For me and my artificial minds, I had more work to do. You've gained 2 levels. You are now level 270. Natural Mana Overwhelming's conversion effects upgraded. New domain skill unlocked. Soul's Expropriation. When a target is sufficiently weakened or close to death, you are now able to extend your spiritual influence to control the target's soul, reinforce the targeted soul, interrupt or disrupt any skill or curses within the target soul, and/or remove any other external influences from target soul. Though we've achieved a fairly easy victory, I still did not achieve the goal of converting a Demon King. I wondered whether the Demon's Son could sense it. Because at that moment, there was a subtle wobble in the Riftgate's path across all the worlds. 331. Relic 2. 331. Year 304. Is it ready? I asked Hawa, hoping, perhaps, that he would have got it done earlier. Initially he expected it to be done by year 307. Not yet. But come to Satria. I have something else for you. Ah well, I suppose we would have to explore the rest of the sun rings while we wait. Lumuf teleported to Satria, the Hawan world with the various divine relics, and we landed in the Hawa priesthood's quiet hideout far away from the rest of the known world. When Lumuf arrived, the high priests and priestesses were all in prayer. There were hundreds of men and women, all wearing golden robes. They sang and chanted, and at this very moment, they channeled fairly strong divine energies in the air. Lumuf felt Hawa's aura brush against ours presence was like the gentle lappings of water on the shore. You have come. A knight covered in golden armor from head to toe with glowing blue eyes stood in front of Lumuf. He wasn't there just a second before, but the moment he appeared, all the priests and priestesses, heads were on the floor, kneeling and praying. The chants somehow got louder. To the mortals around us, Hawa was the sun itself, and he shone with a golden halo of divinity. This appearance of Hawa was surprisingly real, for a summoning manifestation. I have a tool for you. Something that should help you seek out my followers. Even now, across the stars, there are followers of my faith in worlds far, far away from where I can reach. These will allow you to commandeer those who believe and act as if you too work with my voice. In the Golden Knight's hand was a golden circlet. A relic. Hawa's circlet of divinity. Why? Lumuf asked. Because even now, I sense the presence of my followers trapped behind the barrier. There are survivors even within there, though, I do not know what form they take. Lumuf frowned, but he could feel that I was hesitant to accept an object I didn't fully understand, especially a divine relic. I wondered, however little, if this is a trap. If you're concerned that this is a trap, trust my word that it is not. Hawa answered. I understand that it is normal to be skeptical, and yes, I have a few means to act through my relics, but I intend to help my people on the other side. Even if just to get them here. Give us some time to think about it. The gigantic sun rings hovered over their sun, drawing its energies out and turning it into a deep, black geyser. Even after all this while, witnessing how that constant jet of void mana blotted out half the sky was an amazing sight. Do you think there's really something underneath all of that stuff? Stella mused. The presence of so much void mana made her feel a little drunk. She was slightly flushed and had to consciously shut out the ambient void mana. There was so much of it that the void mana seemed to swirl around her like a thick mist of darkness, and gave her a mythical, otherworldly appearance. You all right? Lumuf checked. Yeah, I'll be fine. Just I normally try to draw in void mana from the surroundings. This place has so much of it that I have to remember to shut it out. Stella said, as she waved the mist of darkness away. Well, let's go. Stella's powers were much stronger here. She could easily call on the ambient void mana to do things not possible elsewhere. The domain holders landed on the sun rings and began to search. This time, their focus was something hidden underneath all that strange metallic steel. Something that represented an older past. The domain holders moved quietly and did our best to mask our presence. This was evidently successful, because we kept walking and the demon kings still did not appear. I wonder how they'd pick up on our presence the first time. We had the rest of the order. Lumuf remembered. Maybe that's why. This time it's just us. Hoya sat out the dungeon exploration. She decided her presence on TwinSpace to guide the development of TwinTrees was far more important than whatever the dungeon divers had to do. Lozan looked around, and she had to shield herself the most. The void mana in the air could easily ignite when in contact with her star mana, and even if the density in the ambient air wasn't thick enough to cause a huge explosion, it would still cause small burns. A minor, unnecessary inconvenience. I missed it the first time around. The Dream Academy is impressive, but somehow, being here in person. There was a scale to the entire structure. This is something called a Dyson ring. Stella said. A magical equivalent, I suppose. Something that drains the energy of a sun. Conceptually though, we still don't understand why they need to drain it from the sun. The planetary core is the key to the realm's power. Unless the suns are on the other side of the magical equation. They form a balance with the realm's power in some way. Alka speculated. In ancient myths there is a common type of origin story, where each world has both a mother and a father. The mother is the womb, and the father is the seed. We see this as void and star mana being on sort of opposite ends. So are we leaving half of the powers out there on the table because we've been concentrating on the creation side of powers? Stella wondered. I found something. Rune interrupted and hopped over to what appeared to be a small hatch. Lumuf touched it, and a root extended out of his hand and began to explore where that hatch led them. Why would they build a hatch into this thing? Is it even the only one? It'll take a while. Lumuf said as his magical roots ventured into the hatch. It was fairly deep. The rest of you can keep searching. Once we map out the entire sun rings, we can come back and decide what to do. This is a lot of divine energy to spend on a random finding from a book. Edna poked Alka a little, and the dwarf merely ignored the knight. Rune countered. This feels like adventurer work. And I honestly like it. It reminds me of a much, much easier time of my life. Many adventurers found their big break by hyperfixating on one particular item on some obscure tome somewhere. I'm with Rune, Johann said through their shared connection. Each of the domain holders spread out, and interestingly, we found more hatches and holes. Each led into the sun rings. Some appeared to be impact craters that left deep gashes, but were not repaired. A lot of these hatches and holes led into some old tunnels, and through the use of magic, they discovered that there really was a series of tunnels deep within these gigantic sun rings. It wasn't a solid block of metal around the sun, instead, it was a really thick shell that was wider than Freshka's sprawling city. Then, underneath that extremely thick shell of metal and crystals, were a series of tunnels filled with numerous pillars and beams. This design wasn't uniform throughout the sun rings. Some parts had more solid metal parts, some parts less. There was also a constant flow of magic running through the sun rings, conducted by the unique types of metal within the solid parts. If I was a mage, I'd stay here and study all day. Stella said. But you are a mage. Rune teased. But this is not my type of magic. Okay, fine, if I were some kind of ley line mage, I'd be interested in whatever these sun rings are doing. There was some kind of pattern woven throughout the sun rings, maybe we should map them out first. That sounds like a lot of work. Rune emphasized. Mapping the magical flows of something as gigantic as the sun rings, in hopes of learning how they work, was a monumental affair. It is a lot of work. But we'll learn something. The Void Mage said. There's probably a better way to do it. Do you think we can do it without attracting the attention of the Demon Kings? The Ranger asked. What? You're afraid of them? Stella decided to counter Rune's question. We can deal with the Demon Kings. Besides, we'll move fairly discreetly. Once we build something that can scan these sun rings, then we deploy it everywhere and work with that. It was a technological endeavor, as Stella's request now had to be dealt with by the mages, crafters, and engineers of the Order. A large-scale magical monitoring tool to detect and understand the sun rings' inner magical movements. I'll head back and get the researchers started on the tools we need. Stella said. While the domain holders prepared for the second visit to the sun rings, I also had studies of my own. The two new heroes of Kaval and their growing weapons were of great interest, and as we studied the weapon in greater detail, I realized they were not too complicated. They leached off their main hero's souls and used a fragment of their main hero's souls. This was then carved into something that resembled an artificial soul. Only, it was made using star mana parts. In short, these were just star mana variants of artificial souls. They took shapes and forms differently, in order to manage the eccentricities of working with star mana and the unique qualities of that such a material provided. Of all the parts of the hero's swords, there was a part that was truly worth studying. A way to create star mana. Within each of these living swords, there was a large, wheel-like structure that somehow spun existing star mana into more star mana, inexplicably turning 10 into 11. It was a very, very slow process, which explained why the various heroes' swords throughout Kaval needed to recharge, but still could restore themselves given a long enough time frame. Naturally, I began to experiment on my own and attempted to replicate these structures in regular artificial souls. They failed almost immediately, as these structures themselves, made from regular, non-star mana and non-hero soul materials, collapsed on their own weight. But I didn't stop and made more refinements to these structures. I tweaked the thickness of their spiritual frames and the latticework of how the tiny soul particles were stitched together. Bit by bit the structure began to hold together. All to pursue the hope of achieving star mana generation. Working with normal soul fragments, I still failed. The regular materials were not strong enough. So, I thought that it might need something more resilient as the base. Either a hero's soul fragment or a domain holder. Naturally, I looked to my domain holders. And Lausanne volunteered to help me. Lausanne's domain ability allowed her to copy hero abilities, but the creation of a living hero sword was a bit of hero ability and also that of the spirit. She could copy the abilities of the hero sword, but not its growth effects, which was a result of the soul structure of the sword. I suspected that I needed a bit of her soul to attempt to reverse engineer the hero's ability, and without hesitation, the elven lady gave me a bit of her soul. I had to cut it out of her, but it was surprisingly easy when she did not resist. A domain holder's soul fragment was heavier. It had a mass to it that normal soul fragments didn't. If normal souls felt like holding on to blocks of regular sand, then a domain holder's soul felt like a heavy stone. It had a spiritual weight, and moving it around actually took time and effort. But as I predicted, it was infinitely easier to get it to create a living weapon. That weight and mass bent and changed as I applied the weight of my soul forge. It feels strange, Lausanne said as she watched the process through my dream academy. I can still feel a connection to whatever you're doing. It's like I'm also there and here. Lausanne's own soul was quick to heal the scar left by the removed fragment, and I wondered, to some extent, could I do a whole Ship of Theseus thing where I created a full extension of herself? A clone of a domain holder. That was just so insane, but someday, why not? If I could clone myself as a result of my domain abilities, surely other domain holders could do the same. But for now, what I tried to do was simpler. I tended to the tiny bit of domain holder's soul fragment and noticed that if I fed it enough of my spiritual energy, I could grow it. Just a little bit, and yet, I realized there was tremendous potential for this ability. All because a domain holder's soul fragment was, in some ways, similar to Titan frames. They could be molded. And so, copying the structures found within the still-growing living hero swords, I was finally able to create a copy. The first star mana generator, carved from Lausanne's soul fragment. But the success was short-lived, as the fragment, now shaped into its own little independent artificial soul, lacked the peripheral structures to maintain its form as the star mana began to erode the rest of the things. It collapsed. I copied the hero sword's star mana generation ability, but the supporting structures were not robust enough to withstand the presence of star mana. My spiritual tendrils quickly intervened to prevent it from total loss, and even Lausanne could feel it. She winced as the structure almost collapsed. It felt like a part of me was getting crushed. Oh, sorry about that. I apologized. Let me try again. I tried to build a smaller structure, but alas, it wasn't small enough. The soul fragment I took from Lausanne was still too small to both be a frame and also a component. So, instead, I thought of mixing and matching and used one of my multiple, spare, Titan frames. These things were large soul fragments empowered by my ability, and so, I inserted Lausanne's soul fragment into the Titan frame. At that moment, the soul fragment suddenly flashed, and the Titan frame itself warped. Spear, Lausanne said, as if she had a strong feeling in her heart. Get a spear. I immediately obtained a spear from my treasury, and then, the Titan frame immediately bonded with the spear. The spear itself turned and transformed as something that contained a bit of the both of us. I could feel my link to the spear, and it seemed, Lausanne could as well. Eon Lausannian Living Star Spear. Level 100. Lausanne reacted, surprised by the spear's presence. It was as if two trees were twisted together to form a spear, but one of those trees took the appearance of a sea of shimmering stars. Hello. The spear spoke back to us through that same spiritual connection. Lausanne jerked in surprise. Ah, it seems I forgot that Titan frames are able to maintain a mind of their own. Hello, what should we call you? It is for my parents to name me. The living spear answered. Parents. Lausanne wanted to faint. I found it hilarious that this thing considered itself my child. In a way, it wasn't wrong. The living spear was something created from both of us, her fragment and my Titan frame. I better not give names. I answered. It would be a terrible thing for me to do anything, especially a living spear. The heroic domain holder stared at the spear in great amusement once she recovered herself. She approached the living spear and wondered for herself just what exactly it should be. Lightwood, Lausanne declared, as if the word came to her by heart. You, my dearest spear son, will be Lightwood, and you will be the spear that sets the world of demons aflame. Yes, mother. I didn't quite realize the power of names then, because the spear transformed once more, as this time, it pulled energies from the world around us. The spear immediately gained a relic-like aura and radiated the power of divinity. A spear made by two domain holders. A weapon that was even stronger than the hero items of the hero's forge. A relic unique to Lausanne. I think the other domain holders will want something of the sort too. Lausanne smiled. A sentient, talking weapon for each domain holder sounds quite horrific. What? I believe it is very much expected for us. Edna's quest swords are already very powerful, but if we mix that with your Titan frames, imagine what could be made. Or if Johan's dragon was fused with one. I had not known that it was possible. I countered, but I wondered whether I should abuse the Soul Forge and blend it with my domain holders to create something even more. Certainly not so easy. I believe there may be a spiritual structure or form that you need to discover before you could do so. A secret pattern that is hidden within each type of fusion. But I look forward to using this against the Demon Kings. I briefly remembered the words of the Wisp when I first unlocked the Soul Forge. The soul truly is one of the most incredible powers in the world.